We're happy to have you all here. We're going to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the February 18th Durango City Council meeting. Thank you for all of you who are joining us live today, and thank you for those of you joining us on DGov. And with that, Ben, may we please start with the roll call?
Councillor Baxter.
Present.
Councillor Bettine.
Here.
Councillor Noseworthy.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Brookie.
Here.
And Mayor Youssef.
Hopefully present and here. Moving on to City Council, do we have any actual or perceived conflicts of interest this evening?
None.
Seeing none? Great. Moving on to public participation, but before we start that, I would like to ask City Council if we have support to consider moving agenda item 5.1, presentation on the Animas River Trail North Pedestrian Bridge presentation above to before public participation, given that I'm assuming most people here are going to be speaking about the bridge. So I thought I would see if we could potentially consider keeping the presentation short to possibly no more than 15 minutes, so that we might be able to answer some of the community's questions with a smile, if we can, to hit on the main highlights, because we don't want to keep the public here too long. We want to hear from them as well, but I wanted to see if council would consider that.
Madam Mayor, I think it's totally appropriate that we hear the facts about, more education about the bridge and any new developments and any items that staff learned in the last presentation at the rec center last week. And I think it's totally appropriate to hear first and listen second.
I'm in favor of the same.
I support it. I do encourage you to keep a time limit on it, because I think there's quite a few people here who will want to speak. So I would approve with a caveat of 15 minutes.
Okay? Okay. All right, Ms. Metz, you have 15 minutes.
Who's our timekeeper?
Right.
We'd like to announce about the speakers, sign them and so forth.
Oh, great idea. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We'll put this back down there just in case people would like to sign up. If you'd like to sign up for public participation, we would love you to please do that. It helps us run efficient meetings. Yes.
And could I also add that there's a public participation on the adoption of the homeless plan, strategic plan at a later point in the agenda. So I think this is
separate sign-up sheet for the public hearing.
Non-homeless strategy discussion.
So to clarify, we are having a public hearing for the potential adoption of the Athena Strategic Master Plan. If you want to speak regarding that issue, if you'd sign up on the correct form, that is would likely correctly go under that public hearing.
And if you're here to talk about the bridge, we'd like to have those names as well, and then we'll call you up individually.
Yeah, I think we got them all, but is there anyone else that wants to sign up for that? Okay. And Ms. Metz, there was one request, if you might be able to consider this during your presentation, not to throw you off, but if you might be able to just talk about the timeline of the RFP for construction that is out and answer questions for the community that they might have regarding that, as well as our public processes that we have in place.
Great.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Youssef and members of City Council. There'll be 3 speakers, including myself. Myself is Kathy Metz, Parks and Recreation Director, Scott McLean, Assistant Parks Director, who was very involved in the alternative analysis back in 2008 to 2011, and Scott Chisholm, who's the project manager, landscape architect on this project. So why are we here? You know, one of the things that I wanted to share with City Council as you get to know the Parks and Recreation Department more is people in Durango are very passionate about Parks and Recreation. And what we have learned over the years is that our community cares greatly about what we provide to them, and they always have a strong opinion about the various assets we have. We see this now with the bridge. We saw it before we opened Lake Nighthorse, and we certainly saw it before we opened the Durango Community Recreation Center back in 2002. So our community came up with a vision as we were building the Animas River Trail, which started in the 1970s, but our first master plan was in 2001 when we realized how the important spine should not have any at-grade crossings of major streets. And that was captured in our 2001 Parks, Open Space, Trails Master Plan. We also did a statistically valid survey in 2018 that said that 93% of our city residents use the Animas River Trail. And since the dedicated funding was adopted in 1999, the city has invested over $22 million in the construction of the Animas River Trail, and that includes grants as well as city funds. The community trail is so important to Durango because it links our parks and neighborhoods to central Durango, separate from our city streets. One of the things that we know about the project timeline between 2008 and 2011, the big discussion about is where does the trail lie? Is it on the east side of the tracks, west side of the tracks, east side of the river, west side of the river, along Highway 550? Everybody supported the trail, but they did not want it in their neighborhood. They did not want it next to their house. And so we spent a lot of time trying to figure out the least impactful alignment for the extension of the Animas River Trail from Memorial Park all the way up to Oxbow Park and Preserve. And we're experiencing that same thing now that we're getting into the pedestrian bridge. Early in the design, we suggested that the bridge should be down around 30th Street. Those residents wanted it closer to 32nd Street. Now the residents close to 32nd Street want the bridge closer to 30th or north of 32nd Street Bridge. So we're continuing to hear, we like this project, we support this project, we just don't want it in our front yard. So we know that the train is very busy, particularly in the summer, with 12 trips a day, crossing the tracks at 32nd Street. The Public Utilities Commission regulates crossings of the trail across the railroad tracks, and they have advised the city that we can have no new at-grade trail crossings of the railroad tracks. And so that is a finding of the Public Utilities Commission, which grants the opportunity to cross the tracks. The other thing that we did since the last public meeting is we reached out to the Durango Police Department to find out, it is a busy street, it is the second busiest street in Durango, 32nd Street, but it also has a history of speeding and accidents. And so in the last 10 years, the police department has, since 2010, identified that there has been 1,190 issued citations for people speeding on 32nd Street, and there have been 95 accidents. Of those 95 accidents, 5 were bicycles and 1 was a pedestrian. It's a busy street, and that's why we believe that an at-grade crossing is not safe. The other thing that we know is that the spring runoff does raise the level of the river, and we know that we cannot put a trail underpass, which we typically do with our sections of the Animas River Trail under 32nd Street. It's just too low. It's much lower than other pedestrian bridges that we have been able to go under in other sections of the Animas River Trail. So I'm going to turn this over to Scott McLean, and he's going to talk through the alternative analysis.
Good evening, I'm Scott McLean. I'm the Assistant Parks Director for Parks and Recreation. So kind of wanted to step back and look at, this is a graphic that we got to in 2011 after the process we went through from 2008 to 2011, looking at a number of different alternatives. As Kathy mentioned, that we would come up with this, the staff team along with the engineering consultant who was Loris, it's now Loris Otak. They're out of the Louisville area, north of Denver, but very experienced with trail use design. That's really what they specialize in, is multi-use trails. They do work all across the state, the region, and the nation, but a lot of work in, we've used them before, Santa Fe, Steamboat Springs, Roaring Fork, Glenwood, Aspinall have used Loris as well. They have a strong portfolio of trail projects and a lot of challenging trail projects. So we worked through a number of these alternatives with the consultant during that time and kind of narrowed it down. These were the final 5 that we got to, and I showed this, 1, just to show some of the history that we had, 2, a lot of the ideas, concepts that we've heard from the community in the last week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks really are similar to some of these alternatives. And I just wanted to show, but we have looked at some of these before, and how they are similar to what we're looking at or have heard here recently. So one suggestion we had recently was just stay on 2nd Avenue. So behind the rec center, Demon Bridge, instead of crossing the river at the Demon Bridge, you would just stay on the 2nd Avenue side. The big challenge there is, if you guys can picture, the slope that we have between the railroad tracks, the west side of the railroad tracks is very steep, all the way from behind the fairgrounds up to about 30th Street. There's a pinch point just north of the rec center at 29th Street where we've got a lot of grade difference, narrow corridor between the railroad tracks and adjacent property owners. The amount of retaining wall that we had in that section was significant. So that was the big challenge, is the wall and that pinch point. We also had an issue with utilities that are in that corridor, and then also with losing parking on 2nd Avenue. We mentioned that there's an area where the railroad tracks get close to the curb there. We'd have to push into 2nd Avenue. At that time, we had a lot of the neighbors show up saying, you know, we can't afford to lose parking in our front yard, and concerned with that. So when we looked at this option in 2011, this was the most expensive option of the alternatives that we looked at due to the retaining walls and the structures that we had there. The bridge structure across 32nd Street is similar to the bridge structure that we have with the other alternatives, so that was very comparable. Another suggestion we've had is cross the river at 30th Street. This came out before the meeting we had last week with the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. During that meeting, we also had the suggestion of a crossing at 31st Street. And the individual that brought that up, he is correct that there is some great advantage to having that crossing at 31st Street, but it's still not enough to help us enough. The issue we ran into there was that, and it really is a cost impact and a trail user impact, is that in order to make that work, you're coming from 30th Street. If you're headed north, you're climbing across the river in order to get above the railroad grade. So we've got to clear the railroad by, it's 23 and a half feet for the elevation that the trail needs to be to allow some room for structure. So you're climbing across the river to get across the railroad grade. Then you're dropping back down to 2nd Avenue, traveling 2nd Avenue, and then coming back up. So from a trail standpoint, you're going up, down, as opposed to climbing one structure, crossing everything, and then dropping back down again. There's also an impact there with the cost of the trail, and that there's an additional abutment and an additional ramp to get you back down to that 2nd Avenue grade. So both of these last two concepts have the bridge structure across 32nd. Another suggestion we have is just do the bridge across 32nd Street. Don't worry about the river crossing or the railroad. Utilize what we have with the existing 32nd Street bridge. The drawbacks there is one, that we've got a pedestrian and bike crossing that doesn't meet our trail standard. It's challenging, it's narrow. We still have an at-grade crossing of the railroad tracks. And then the concern of just, is this effective enough that people are going to use it? Or if you cross the bridge on 32nd, you're at that corner, are people going to make the turn and go back a couple hundred feet to do the switchback and come back over? You lose some of the effectiveness with that. As Kathy mentioned, we looked at an alternative of going underneath the bridge. On the east side has a little bit more clearance than what the west side does, so this is going underneath it on the east side. The main impact there was not having enough clearance to provide year-round access through there. With high water, we would need to close that section. The other main impact or showstopper there was the property to the north side of 32nd. Property owners not being willing to sell that property in 2010, 2011, and the city not being in a position to want to condemn property for the development of the trail. And then here in the last couple of weeks, we had the suggestion about coming underneath the west side, where you would come across 32nd Street with a new pedestrian bridge that parallels 32nd. You'd make a 90-degree turn before the railroad tracks. It'd be a tight switchback. And then from 32nd Street to the north here, in picture, to get underneath the 32nd Street, you are 11 feet underneath the railroad grade. By the time you get to the north, you need to be 25 feet above railroad grade. So that stretch between 32nd Street and the north end of the Animas City Park is essentially one long ramp structure getting you to 25 feet above railroad grade on the north end. So that whole riverbank becomes some sort of structure, significant impact to the view shed. And then the concept of crossing 32nd Street on a diagonal where you had one bridge that crossed both 32nd Street and the river. This essentially, you're making the diagonal longer, so you're making your bridge span longer. With the additional length, you get additional structure with those bridges, so your linear foot cost goes up with your bridge. You've taken the visual impact. Your highest point is where you cross the railroad tracks. With the location that we've been working on and have proposed, we're right behind City Market where we've got the most visual impact. This moves it north, so you're across the street from the apartments and then across the river from the residents that are north of 32nd Street. The other drawback to this alternative was that you lose that connection to the south side of 32nd Street. So that gets us to the alternative that we've been looking at. I'm going to turn that over to Scott. He's the landscape architect from Parks and Rec that's been working on the details, so he'll get into that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
Please make sure to speak pretty loud so that everybody in the back can hear you as well.
Sure. Scott Chisholm, City of Durango landscape architect and project manager. So really, how did we get here? 3 reasons: aesthetics, feasibility, and cost. And I'm going to go back to feasibility. So looking up at this diagram, this looks really similar to one of the diagrams earlier. It was actually the second one that Scott showed you, with the red line, where the crossing was south of 32nd. And we're really trying to compress that distance between Memorial Park and Animas City Park. In this diagram, the feasibility of getting a bridge across the river is a big deal. We were looking at one of the shortest ways to get across the river, and this location is that spot. We proposed a crossing across the river that's about 178 feet long. The crossing that's further south that we looked at and analyzed, it's about a 225-foot span. In order to make that span across the river, how we get a bridge across is a big question, and it leads to costs. On the east side of Memorial Park, I'm sure you all are familiar, there's a pretty significant grade change between where the park is and where the riverbank is. So that's really one of the primary reasons that we got to this point where we're really trying to compress and bring together and shorten and therefore reduce the total cost of the crossing point. So this diagram illustrates a little more close view. On the left side is that crossing at Memorial Park, going all the way up to the upper part of the diagram, where we land the trail behind City Market and then make the crossing across 32nd Street and then come down into Animas City Park. I mentioned feasibility. By placing the bridge structure in this position, in this location, relative to existing access points, aka 3rd Avenue, 2nd Avenue, Memorial Park, and the railroad tracks, it enables the real-world logistics of how we get a structure in place. So this riverbank area is a place where it's feasible to get equipment and to get a bridge structure in place. We've been asked, what is this bridge going to look like? And we look straight to some of our existing bridges. Here's a picture of High Bridge, which is a little bit south of town. Picture of the Wilson Gulch Bridge, which is in Third Springs.
Do you mind if I interrupt for a minute? Our 15 minutes are up, Council.
Thank you.
Do you mind if Mr. Chisholm has another 5 to 7 minutes to wrap
I'll keep it
this?
brief.
Is that good?
I'll keep it brief.
Okay.
Thank you, we appreciate it.
Yep. So scrolling through, Irish Schneider Park. I think everyone in this room is familiar with this bridge. You'll see these same design characteristics in these photos that we were showing. A arch structure, weathering steel, and sort of horizontal rails to create that pedestrian protection for the trail user relative to the edge of the river. the Highway 160 pedestrian bridge that crosses over the river, just south of the town core. Quite a sizable structure, but a very similar design characteristic to what we've been proposing. So we've been asked, what does this look like from the pedestrian perspective? This is standing, you look in the right side of this image, that's the sidewalk that crosses, it's on the north side of the vehicular bridge. So I mentioned aesthetics and cost and logistics. We've positioned this trail at a location here where it's not trying to work with the fewest or the least amount of direct impacts to residential properties. And this location provides that ability. So by siting the tallest part of the structure, which is of course a challenge for us to get across the railroad tracks, behind the windowless facade, the backside of City Market, that is one of the reasons why we have proposed this position, this location for this alignment. You'll see that consistent arch structure characteristic. The span on the left is going over the river. The span in the center of the image above the car there, that's over the railroad tracks. It has enclosure, glass sides, kind of in the top 2/3, sort of a solid metal side, and a roof enclosure over the top. All of those components are there for very particular reasons. The glass sides and the metal side is all part of protecting the trail user from the passing trains and the coal steam. The roof on top is there to keep the trail clear from snow, because it's actually a significant issue to make sure that we keep the trail clear and we're not putting snow back on top of the tracks below. The bridge span over the street will have mesh over the portion of the bridge that's directly over the street, again to protect the motorists and the folks down below from anything that might be happening up above. So it's really creating that containment for the trail user as they cross the bridge.
Okay.
Here's another perspective, just briefly.
Really quickly.
From East 2nd Avenue, looking out across the river and the bridge, what that might look like. Again, from the pedestrian trail user perspective, looking to the northwest, over the vehicular bridge, as well as the bridge that crosses over the street towards Animas City Park. And lastly, what it might look like if you were on the bridge structure looking northward across the bridge and up the river towards the mountains.
Thank you.
Mayor Eustace, I'm sure that council also has questions, so do you want us to hold those off until after public comment, or how do we
Good
want to do
idea.
that?
Let's wait till after public comment. Let's do that.
So at this point, I can conclude the presentation, or I can
Thank
give
you.
council a brief update on where we are with the rest of the construction project that's underway now. I'll leave it to the council.
I've heard the other presentation, and I think that given the size of the room, I'd like to suggest.
Okay, we'll go on.
Public
If I could ask Kathy just to speak for 1 minute on the bidding process, just for openness and transparency for everyone in the room.
The Animas River Trail North Pedestrian Bridge is currently out to bid. Bids are due the 24th of March. And it is for as we showed in the graphic, is for the section of bridge crossing over the river, the railroad tracks, and 32nd Street with an add alternate that allows for a ramp down behind North City Market. The reason that we are out to bid is we have a lot of conversation about the cost of the structure. We have a very good engineer that's given us an estimate within our budget of $3.4 million for the main structure, with the add alternate being an additional $700,000. And so we will have a hard bid on the 24th of March that will answer the question of how much will this structure cost.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Okay, So with that, brief presentation from staff, thank you very much. We're going to move on to public participation. A few things I'm going to ask. We have a lot of people here tonight, so this section of the agenda is set aside for people to make comments or ask questions that are not otherwise on the agenda, for example, the public hearings. We want to ask, please do not feel like you have to repeat yourself. If you want to just get up and say, I agree with all that's been said or what someone else said, please feel free to go ahead and do that to save time. I would really appreciate it if we could hold our applause. If we hold our applause, it lets me immediately bring up the next person, and it's just a lot more efficient. You can, if you really feel like you have to let everybody know that you are behind that person's thoughts, just, give a little hand. Our TV will catch it. Our videographers will catch it. So it just helps me to immediately bring up the next person. We are going to end our public participation tonight at 2 hours. So I would like to give everybody a fair chance to speak if they want to speak. We're limiting conversations to 3 minutes, getting shorter every day. Councilor Bettine is going to wave his hand at 2.5 minutes to give you warning. And at 3 minutes, we are going to please ask you to stop so we can hear from everybody. If we do not get to everybody, we have more sessions for public participation regarding the bridge. You could speak on February 26th at the Multimodal Advisory Board meeting, that's at 4 p.m. On February 27th at the Recreation Center, that's at 5 p.m. That's another community meeting. And you're welcome to join us again here on March 2nd at our City Council meeting. So with that, I'm going to go to our first speaker tonight, and it's Jade Pruitt with MIAC.
Hi, I'm Jade Pruitt. So firstly, tonight I'd like to talk on behalf of the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission. We held an event on Noel night where we had free cookie decorating, and DHS ProStart was generous enough to make all the cookies that we had out for people to decorate. So we are presenting them with a check just for their generous donation of all the cookies. Secondly, speaking on behalf of Durango High School, I have a few announcements. The DHS Choir is happy to say they have reached their fundraising goal of $55,000 to send 21 students to sing with the National High School Choir at Carnegie Hall in March. They'd like to thank the community and Durango Education Foundation for helping them reach that goal, because obviously that is a big number. Secondly, DHS Rocks, which is a talent show made entirely of students, made $7,480 this past month. All of those proceeds go into DHS Cares, which is a fund that the school uses for students and families in need within the DHS community. Skills USA Week was held last week, where they made a home-cooked meal for staff, as well as held their regional competition. There were 71 competitors in 20 different categories, ranging from woodworking to crime scene investigation. DHS placed in every category they competed in, which is quite an accomplishment. In conjunction with La Plata County Clerk Tiffany Parker, the League of Women Voters, and Fort Lewis College Student Senate, the DHS Student Council hosted a voter registration drive for seniors to increase involvement in the political process. Lauren Grindy was chosen to represent Durango High School in the 2020 Scholastics Arts Awards Student Exhibition. Her work will be exhibited in Denver for the month of March as part of this elite school art exhibition. Her digital artwork, Animal Blood, has been awarded a Silver Key Award. Over 6,000 works of art from approximately 2,200 high school students throughout the state compete for the special recognition. Student Council presented for their National Gold Council of Excellence application in January. If they are awarded the distinction, it will be for the 10th year in a row. Last year, they were one of only 10 high schools in Colorado and 220 nationwide to be awarded the honor. Theater Troupe 1096 is working on their production of Trap, which opens on February 28th. More information and tickets can be found on their website. In conjunction with Southwest Colorado Community Foundation, DHS hosted blind adventure athlete Eric Wainmeyer, who spoke about overcoming barriers as well as his experience as the first blind kayaker to kayak the Grand Canyon. Finally, as our school seeks to be the top public high school in Durango, we're happy to announce that the 2018-2019 graduation rate was over 90%, which is a huge accomplishment. Thank you.
Very
Thank
nice.
you very much. My own counsel for
Yeah,
the
you
rules.
forgot.
Okay, can we hear please from Lou Pratt? If I said that correctly?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, good.
Thank you, I appreciate the time. I was very impressed with this article, or it's really caught my attention. It was, surfaced a couple weeks ago. I attended the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting and heard really a lot of concern that people didn't know what they're to expect on that. I don't know what they had seen in the past, but many of the people there did not realize what the bridge was going to look like or really how much it costs. So it was certainly raised a lot of costs. I'll just pass this on. A lot of the questions really surfaced around cost, and as a biker and as a user of this trail, why I go a lot in the Old Town, I like to call it Old Town Durango. You have a lot of sections there that are very dangerous, where the roots have raised up, and I've heard, well, it's going to be replaced, it's going to be replaced. I've heard that now for a couple of years. I don't know what the status of that is. But I'd like to see us use the most effective approach to achieving your process. And from what I can tell, I think following the 2nd Street, and I heard the staff here say that that's the most expensive option. I don't quite know why you need so many retaining walls they seem to imply would be needed, because it would just follow the 2nd Street to a large degree, with possibly some physical barrier. And it's fairly wide without a lot of traffic. It's not a through street. It's 30 feet wide. That's pretty good width for a local street. It could be one way, number of ways that could be handled. So if you use that approach, when you approach 32nd Street, you can look out and you can see that the bridge doesn't have to go a lot higher to go over 32nd Street, because the trail goes down as it approaches 32nd. Then you're on the other side, which is actually quite easy to handle, I think, for users. Not only that, the bridge, you might say, south of the rec center is really substandard. It's only maybe 4 feet, 5 feet, maybe it's 6 feet wide. I don't know what it is. And you also have to physically cross over the rail to get onto the 3rd Street side of the river. So if you stay on the 2nd Street side, it's a lot easier, I think, for a lot of reasons. And I'm sure you've got the funds, which I'm sure are dedicated to the trail, but we also talk, and it was also mentioned at the Parks meeting that we went to, before the discussion occurred for the 32nd Street Bridge. The question there came up, when are you going to do something down at Home Depot and go on to Three Springs? And that's where I think some of this money could be used, if you don't have to go across the river and then back across the river and up the trail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Sarah Burris, thank you. She knows, she's ready.
I'm really actually Jerry Brown. Jerry is out of the country, and I think those of you who were at the last meeting heard him speak. I have a letter and I have a couple of pictures. Thanks, Ben. So Jerry is the one that proposed this crossing right about at 31st Street. And I'd like to preface this by saying, I'm Sarah Musil Burris, 112 East 31st Street. I live right there, and I am opposed to spending this much money on the crossing, but if we're going to spend, if we have to do something, I'm willing to sacrifice the view out my living room window, which is going to be looking at this bridge, because I think this is a better option. So with that, Jerry has been a gas and oil surveyor for 25 years. He's currently the vice president of the Colorado Trail Foundation. He's done all the mapping for the CT and the CDT, not just Colorado, but in the U.S. on the Continental Divide Trail. So here's his letter, and I'll go along with a couple of his pictures. My name's Jerry Brown, semi-retired surveyor. I live at 3065 East 2nd. I attend the Parks and Rec meeting concerning the new pedestrian bridge over the Animas River on 212. My wife, Dee Dee DeHaro Brown, and I have followed closely the development of the river trail during the 26 years we've lived here. We're strong supporters of the river trail and use it daily. I totally support building bridges to get across the river and 32nd Street. However, I think the currently proposed alignment for the 32nd Street bridge is not satisfactory. The proposed bridge would be 22 feet high when it crosses the train tracks at 32nd. The river is 18 feet lower than this existing 32nd Street bridge. That means the bridge would be 40 feet above the river. As a comparison, the new 4-story Holiday Inn Express being constructed on Camino del Rio is 45 feet high. It will be a massive eyesore. It could be potentially dangerous, likely fatal, if for some reason someone fell or chose it as a method of ending his or her life. I would remind others that a suicide occurred on US 550-160 High Bridge in 2017. I think there's quite a few people who would suffer vertigo or this word I don't know, aerophobia, sorry, I should have asked him, from the exposure and would choose not to go up there. I have a suggestion for an alternate scenario. I dug out some of my survey gear and did a few measurements. I proposed a single span crossing the river 437 feet south of 32nd Street where the tracks are 15.6 feet lower than the sidewalk along the river. So, this, about in the center of this picture, oh shit, is the high point, and that is only 7 feet taller than, it would only have to go 7 feet taller at that place, because the tracks are 14.6 feet lower. The 437-foot figure is where I made the measurement, but the height above the tracks is approximately the same if this were to be constructed within 100 feet in either direction of where I chose to make the measurement. The 6.4 feet is very workable. It could be achieved with dirt fill or a structured northbound turn and gradual drop to ground level.
Thank you, Ms. Burrs.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay.
We got a good idea, though.
Okay.
We very got much.
All right, and there's the grade changeover. It only has to go 14 feet.
Mr. Brown's testimony is available in the, Mr. Brown's testimony is in live in person and available on the Parks and Recreation Board meeting as well. So if anybody wanted to hear him in person, he presented his ideas there as well.
Great, thank you. Jamie McMillan, please. Is Jamie here?
I saw him outside. Oh, yeah.
He's coming?
And give him a seat.
Oh, yeah, it's nice.
How much time do I have?
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Oh, that's gonna be hard. No, I'll take it. Put my prop real quick here. So everyone, upside down. Oh. I did that. Can everybody get it looked at? How beautiful is that?
What is it?
You might
What is it?
show it to us.
Maybe I'll just go ahead and introduce myself, and that way everybody knows why I'm here.
Okay.
So I just want to thank you. I'm actually here on behalf of the Durango Marijuana Hospitality Association, thanking the mayor and city council for letting us move forward this summer to look at the new hospitality law. So far, we've been very pleased with the efforts with community development. I want to say thanks to Kevin Hall and Nicole and Leah, who had helped us look at the situation in terms of the context of the new bill, which obviously includes not only the consumption of marijuana, but the limited sales of beverages, flour, and also edibles. And so what you're seeing in this diagram, or this Fort Lewis project by our student, is what an actual hospitality lounge would look like. And we have to say that we've been very successful with marijuana in general in Colorado. The state has done over $3 billion in sales last year. The taxes paid the city are $800,000 a month now, which is about 3% of the revenue collected. And we think there's a lot more, though, that we can do. So on behalf of our members, I wanted to just say that we believe marijuana customers, tourists, and patients at this stage have still nowhere to consume these products, even though they can be purchased. And they have a very dissimilar experience to other establishment patrons that freely consume and enjoy alcohol without reservation. As one of our members said, I support implementing marijuana hospitality in Durango because it allows users and workers to have a safe environment for consumption and, most of all, socialization, which none of these people have right now. This restriction of expressive outlets for cannabis users ratifies, although unintentionally by this council, a discriminatory position and a discriminatory effect upon the cannabis community who feel like they are as large or important as a part of the community as anyone. However, you can change that, and you have the power as this council in providing reasonable ordinances and fair licensing schemes that recognize those rights, that could attract a significant amount of investment, provide mobility and opportunity for our cannabis workers. Many of them are working on hourly wages, and also attract, obviously, more cannabis tourism. In closing, I want to, on behalf of our members, thank you, and we ask that the city take action and make a substantial step towards implementing this otherwise lawful state bill right now in 2020. And we believe to opt into marijuana hospitality is the fair decision, is the equitable decision, and it's the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mark Ward. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry, I kind of messed up. Doug Lyon, and you're next.
And if you'd like to go,
I have to pay better attention, I'm sorry.
Doug Lyon, 940 East Fifth Avenue. I'm here this evening to speak in favor of the bridge. Survey in 2018, 93% of the people use the Animas River Trail. We've done a lot of statistically valid surveys over the years regarding the popularity of the Animas River Trail and the usage of all of our Parks and Rec amenities. And consistently, the Animas River Trail has been by far, overwhelmingly, the most popular and the most used amenity we have. It's worth noting that that is a 365-day-a-year amenity, and we have millions and millions of dollars of flat grass frozen right now that is waiting for springtime, and that's of course very popular as well. But you know, it's always been controversial to some extent, Parks and Rec or even the Animas River Trail. I was thinking the other day about what it must have been like 40 years ago when the first people got together and they had this vision of a trail along the river up and down the existing Durango of the day, and how they must have been met with such derision. It's because it's going to be so hard and going to take so long and cost so much money. And well, I mean, imagine the first section poured behind Durango High School, where it wasn't a special sales tax either. It was out of the general fund. And in those days, Durango was poor. But they made that sacrifice because they were pursuing a long-term vision over opposition. And now here we are, all the way from Escalante Crossing, from Home Depot to 32nd Street, and then beyond 32nd Street to Oxbow. And my wife and I walked it Saturday from 32nd Street to Escalante Crossing so that we could reflect not only upon the construction of the Animas River Trail and what it looks like, but also what it means to the community. Our observations are that there are tons of people on that trail, even in places I thought there wouldn't be a lot of traffic, a lot of pedestrian traffic, like behind Sirius Texas South or behind the main mall or behind Walmart. We were never alone on that trail. And I did marvel at some of the stretches of that trail behind the main mall, behind Sirius Texas, that beautiful, sinuous section, and the bridge going across the river there. Those weren't free. Those were expensive. And we couldn't imagine today not having those sections. And now we have a barrier, 32nd Street, the second busiest street in Durango, 10,000 cars a day and growing, and it's a barrier to a real destination in which we have invested millions, Oxbow Park. Well, we all know what's going to happen. We've built an attraction there. Dad's going to have a couple of paddle boards. Kids are going to meet there. They're going to travel.
Wrap up, please.
And, well, they're going to travel over there as kids will do. And a final thought. Remember, if we can't get across 32nd Street and the river, I fail to see how we're going to get across 550, 160 and go to Three Springs, because that is a big job. Let's get this 40-year dream done and vote yes on completing this project. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mark Ward? Sorry about that. You're up now, I'm sure.
I'm pretty flexible on this.
Okay.
So I appreciate being called to speak before you as part of the public. My name is Ann Marquardt, 3254 East 6th Avenue. My point is not NIMBYism. It doesn't impact my view one way or the other. I'm going to continue to use the 32nd Street Bridge to walk to City Market for my groceries because I like direct pedestrian access to where I'm going. So it's not about that, and I'd like to just set that aside for a minute. I am one of those classic tax and spend liberals of La Plata County. I have never seen an investment in public infrastructure that I have not liked. I have never seen an investment in public education I have not supported. And I am offended at the thought that we are saying that 2 5-foot wide sidewalks on a bridge do not somehow equal the 10-foot wide pedestrian park that we need and cycle path that we need. I don't get the math. I'd also like to just leave you with the thought that priorities change. When the idea of interconnectivity was first introduced in 2001, it made perfect sense. Since then, though, I think we've seen cities all over the world do really wonderful bike paths that integrate with city streets around the area. Whether it's Barcelona or whether it's Amsterdam with 500,000 bicyclists traveling every day to work. They do it, it's at grade, and they don't have fatalities. We could learn something from other people. I would encourage us to look at how our priorities and how our community has changed since 2001. Three Springs did not exist. We have a whole community of people out there now paying taxes who want some sort of connectivity. Lake Nighthorse, a hugely popular facility, did not exist. Ewing Mesa is a potential huge bonus for our community, both from a tax dollar point of view of recreation, as well as just an incredible piece of property. But we need to do something with it. It was not an option. Is that my, no?
No.
Okay. We have less money than we thought we would in 2001. Times change. Flexibility is key to good governance as well as good citizenry. And I would encourage us all to think about that. Is that it?
You have 30 more seconds.
I've got 30 more seconds. So just I ask you to slow down, wait for the paths to be connected up to ART North, see what impact is going to be brought by 32nd Street traffic down, ART North traffic down, and also really do good traffic surveys of how much extra traffic goes to the 33rd Street Bridge, and let's do a total vision for the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet Wiley. Thank you guys for raising hands. I appreciate that.
Hi, my name's Janet Wiley. I live at 312 Fiesta Circle. And thank you again for hearing us. I've been speaking for this bridge and this bike path and this Oxbow Park for 15 years. My family's, I was born and raised in Durango. I used to ride my bike to Smiley Junior High School on Florida Road when it was a two-lane highway, or two-lane road, and it was dangerous. And people say, oh, you're born and raised here. You must not like the growth in Durango. And I tell them, the growth in Durango has been done so thoughtfully and so elegantly that I love the growth. It's fine. And especially the amenities that have come along with it. Our family donated a large portion of the bike path from Nature's Oasis all the way to Cundiff Park, that really beautiful section along the river through the Cottonwoods. Our family donated that property for the bike path because we understood the vision of the bike path and the connectivity from South Town to North Town. And I don't think it's a matter of Three Springs neighborhood versus Animas City neighborhood. Right now, the design and the vision has been to take this bike path to Oxbow and to do a surface street crossing it's dangerous. You lose the experience of the bike path. And we're not like these European cities that live with cars and live with 12 million bikers. We don't have the huge amount of bikers, and in America, everybody drives everywhere. If we can put some money in our biking infrastructure, we're building for the future. We're building a community where people, neighbors can have connectivity, and we don't have to build parking structures downtown to support that. I think that it's about the experience also. I think the bike path, if you get on it and you ride from wherever to whatever point, it's just a fabulous experience. And I commute that way. I rode my bike here tonight, and I feel safe, and I get to work every day, and I don't have to worry about a parking ticket, and I think that's where our future lies. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dick White, please. Former mayor, 2 times, and 8 years on council.
You took away my second sentence. Actually, you did my first too. I'll just say that I reside at 575 East 8th Street. I want to thank Kathy Metz and her staff for the very informative presentation that you put together, because I think it provides the full context for the council's discussion about this proposed bridge. And the bridge will, as we've been hearing, will carry the trail over the river, over the railroad tracks, and over 32nd Street. I support the completion of the project now. It represents the culmination of the multi-decade effort to construct the Animas River Trail along the entire length of the river as it courses through Durango. The vision always has been to have a continuous trail that does not intersect automobile traffic. Previous city councils have dealt with other challenges that associated with the implementation of the vision. For example, approving the passage under Main Avenue near Rotary Park. When the city council adopted the current route for the trail north of 32nd Street, we understood perfectly well the necessity that there were going to be bridge or bridges to cross the river, the railroad, and the street. And we understood that it would be an expensive undertaking. Escalation of the cost of material and labor have increased that price tag, as they have for every capital project in recent years. However, further delay will result in even greater costs, or else the task of this crucial connector might never be built. Successive city councils have been blessed by the willingness of our voters to approve sales taxes dedicated to civic improvements. Construction of the Animas River Trail, along with the rec center, was the prime motivation for the 1999 dedicated sales tax. Completion of the trail was one of the chief goals for the passage and extension of the 2015 extension of the levy. The bridge is a crucial piece for meeting the goal and fulfilling the original vision. It's true that there's an opportunity cost to allocating $4 million of dedicated funds for this project, other projects may be delayed, and some might never happen. The Parks, Open Space, Trails, and Recreation Master Plan provides a menu of such projects that successive councils will select with knowledgeable input from the staff and the relevant community advisory boards. The Animas River Trail, however, remains the centerpiece of our prize-winning recreation program. Projects that represent legacy opportunities come to every city council. Projects for which generations of residents and subsequent councils are grateful. The Animas River Trail is such a legacy project. Please build your legacy as the council that completed it, not the one that failed to do so.
Perfect timing. Thank you. I also wanted to notice, as I'm recognizing the former mayor and city councilor, that Doug Lyon as well. Thank you for your service too, Mr. Lyon, all those years on council and serving as mayor. Okay, with that, Carolyn Hunter, please.
Good evening. Yes, I do. I've heard just, yeah, thank you. I think the next one is that one. No, that's one. There's one before that, but at any rate, we'll find it maybe. Yeah. Good evening, City Council. Lynn Schaller and I would like to combine our comments so that we can get 6 minutes, because I practiced this many times, shortened all my words, and, okay? So,
So long as she's standing there with you.
yes, she is.
We walked the trail together.
We did. Carolyn Hunter, Context Architecture, 1911 Main Avenue.
Lynn Schaller, 1099 Main Avenue, number 409 in Durango.
Okay, good evening, city councilors. I attended last week's bridge presentation and walked the site, and would like to offer a design idea to make the connection from Oxbow Park to the rec center shorter, less expensive, and less visually obtrusive. The city has worked hard to preserve the scenic views on our in-town stretch of river, creating the River Corridor Overlay Zone. I wonder how this new bridge proposal would meet the River Corridor Overlay guidelines. And I also wonder why has such a major element within our city's fabric been not seen yet by the city's design review board. The main dilemma and therefore expense of connecting this trail is to cross the railroad tracks, and where they need 22 feet under the bridge. And you can see in this photo, the top horizontal rail of that crossing signal is 21 feet. So the underside of the bridge is 1 foot higher than that. By the time you get a roof over the bridge, you're probably talking 10 feet higher. A workable alternative is, let's see if I can get, whoops, okay. Why not create a more direct trail connection? It's the first alternative that was explained to us between the rec center and Oxbow Park by staying entirely on the west side of the railroad tracks. Starting at the crossing here, you could either do an at-grade enhanced crossing with lights like you have at Camino del Rio, only it's 1/2 the width. Or you could do a pedestrian bridge. You see how this ramp, the sidewalk ramps down, but just that one pedestrian bridge over 32nd Street, you would need a 14-foot clearance, which is 8 feet lower than the 22 feet needed over the railroad tracks. So you've just lowered your bridge 8 feet, you don't need the enclosures around it, and you've shortened your ramps, because handicap ramps are a slope of 1 to 20. So you've shortened your ramps by 16 feet. So let's see, we've got the next, okay, so, whoops, there. So the sidewalk behind City Market, there is an existing sidewalk there. It continues without driveway interruptions southward to 31st Street. Beyond this, as you can see, this topography is a little bit steeper. However, you could get a nice wide path just adjacent to the curb, in between the trees and the curb, or if you needed it wider, you could go on the west side of the trees. But on the right side of the trees, you're just constructing it at grade. Continuing along this, you can see the grade is steeper, but half the trail could be on level grade, and the other half could be on, just a small, short retaining wall. I have a hard time believing that this proposal is the most expensive option. Continuing, this is standing further south at 30th Street. You can see this is the pinch point between the curb and the railroad tracks. So my proposal there, you can see how none of these parking spots is used, is to create a modified street section. City Planning Department has done this on North 31st Street, to take the parallel parking lane, turn it into a trail with a landscape strip on the street side. And that same solution works. Perhaps this is the expense of the first alternative that made it so expensive. Of course, we wouldn't move the utilities here. The parallel parking, which you can see is already used as a trail, could have a landscaping strip on one side. Then we get to another pinch point. This is the 2nd Avenue dead ends into the north side of the rec center. You see the rec center here on the left side of this photo. The width between this existing steel bollard and that wall is more than 7 feet. My outstretched arms are 7 feet. So it's perfectly wide enough for a trail without interfering with the delivery. And from that point, the trail connects to the existing sidewalk on the east side of the rec center. This new shorter piece of river trail on the west side of the river would reduce foot traffic at that railroad crossing at the pedestrian bridge behind the high school. High school students and rec center users would have a much more direct path northward to Oxbow Park,
with much less vertical change. This is friendlier to wheelchair users and senior citizens. Best of all, this new trail connection would have minimal to no impact on the residential neighborhoods, no visual river impact on the scenic riverbanks and views, and would be, in my opinion, a fraction of the cost to construct, because you're doing sidewalks at grade, which has to be cheaper than doing a diagonal bridge over the river. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ron Pond, please.
Thank you for your time. My name is Ron Pond, and I've lived on Animas Drive for 34 years, biked and walked it into town much of that time. And I appreciate your time. Seems like the only place that we can ever talk to government anymore and make a difference. Really like that idea. You get me across 32nd Street, and I'm going to take my bike or walk up 2nd Avenue, either way, no matter what you do. So I really, really, really like that idea.
Thank you. John Simpson, please. Is John still here? Hi. Sorry, hiding in the back.
Well, they're watching the screen out there.
Okay.
Mayor Youssef, my name is John Simpson. I live at 1831 Crestview Drive. I'll be talking about a few things on the agenda tonight and your study session that's upcoming as well. Before Kim and Barbara were elected, decisions were de facto made by the city manager with little interference from council. I was glad to see that process stop. However, the current council is struggling to implement the best way to make a decision. The direction you have implemented is best described as a paralyzing bureaucracy. You have overdone the use of committees to avoid discussions about decisions that need to be made timely. The most obvious example is the paralysis of the 2020 budget. Rather than face the tough issues on a timely basis, you're pushing decisions to the fledgling finance committee. Council has avoided discussing thorny discussions like capital carryover. There's been no disclosure of substantial changes made to the process that has resulted from the delay of this budget. It appears you'll be asked to approve a budget that will shuffle the chairs on the deck, but leave the flaws of the system intact. I've heard Amber say she's not received direction from council on how to manage the capital projects, specifically carryover projects. The implied message is this lack of action is approval of the odd system derived by Ron and Julie. Amber continues to put her energy into implementing Ron's plan rather than attacking the real financial problems. Our new city manager must have the skills to develop a process that will allow council to make timely decisions after thorough analysis of the option. Amber has not demonstrated she has this skill. She's working hard for the permanent job, but her experience under Ron is a hindrance. Ron's budget has been implemented with a veneer of friendliness. The dynamics of this new council has been interesting to watch. Kim and Barbara are attempting to change the way things were done, regaining the trust of the citizens. Dean and Chris are trained to support the city manager, regardless of the facts. This leaves Melissa, instrumental in assisting the new evaluation of the city manager and making it clear things must change. However, it seems you've gotten cold feet. It appears your strategy is to use committees to bail you out of the tough spot you're in. You've allowed Amber to provide ways to avoid the heat. Please do not rely heavily on appointed committees. Staff has an inordinate amount of impact on these committees, and the recommendations are often flawed. Witness the Infrastructure Advisory Committee, where contrary to Chris's position, there's only one engineer on that committee. Or the Parks and Rec Committee that has created this uproar of this bridge. Mayor Youssef.
Thank you. Andy Cora, please.
Andy Cora, 312 Fiesta Circle. Hi, neighbors. I'm so glad that we are discussing the design of this final link of the Animas River Trail. I noticed that Marsha Porter Norton was here this evening. She presided over she can tell you, many of these meetings that had hundreds of people in them, where we went through all of these design processes, looked at all the different options. I trust that the city, and maybe I'm wrong, but I trust that these guys did consult with professional trail builders in Denver, some of the best in the country, and I trust that they looked at and costed a lot of things. I do know, one thing about the 2nd Street connection, I'm all for whatever works best. We do need to be 25 feet from the railroad track. So the edge of the trail has to be 25 feet out from that. So keep that in mind. I also noticed conveniently that you skipped the 5 houses just past that, just past the utilities up there. I'm not sure if we knock on those doors, those people are going to be real happy that the trail is going to be in their front yards and take their parking away. But we can certainly look at it, but I'm not into delay at this point. I mean, we have gone, how many years have we gone now? I mean, this project is ready to go. It is next in line. And I also like data. So I'd like to see some data on how much we spend on our city streets, how much we spend on car infrastructure in this town, how much we spend on parking. Because I'm so happy that we are debating and talking about pedestrian connections. I love a pedestrian connection. I think it's our future to be connected, to be able to commute seamlessly as pedestrians. And again, we talk about data. I'd like to see the data on how much we spend on that, because $4 million does sound like a lot, but you have to think about it not for this section, but for the whole length of the trail. You also have to think about the number of safe crossings. And people go, oh, well, I don't know that anybody ever crosses there. Well, I know that we do cross there. I live north of that point. I also know that if say it was only 20 people a day, we're not talking about an investment for next week. We're talking 10, 20, 40, 60 years down the road that this pedestrian infrastructure is going to live in this town, right? So if it's 20 years and it's 20 crossings, what is that, 146,000 safe crossings that we know we can guarantee in this town, right? So I raised a kid north of there. I know it's difficult to cross. I wouldn't let our kid cross 32nd Street by himself, even with a raised thing and flashing lights. I wouldn't let that happen. It's got to be on a bridge. It's got to be traffic separated. That was the vision. We need to get it done. It's next in line. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Dillman, please.
Hi, my name's Dave Dillman. I'm at 3015 East 7th Avenue, and I'm in support of the option that was presented for the bridge. I did a little research today. Grand Junction Sentinel had an editorial in 2019. It said Grand Junction could learn a lesson from Durango on how successful our Parks and Rec department has been. It's time that we learn a lesson for ourselves, okay? And we also consider some people that lack the capacity to advocate for the construction of this bridge, which I'll get into. I want to mention, though, that I just want to give you a little definition of a red herring. A red herring, I looked this one up, is a seemingly plausible, though ultimately irrelevant diversionary tactic. It's too industrial. I'm not going to go into defusing all of these, but it blocks the view from the 32nd Street Bridge as you're looking when you're driving across. Parents need to be, I heard this one, parents need to be better parents, and we wouldn't have these kind of problems. Yeah, I know you've heard it too. The cost is too high. So is this a person that's saying the cost is too high? Are they a civil engineer who understands soil structure, stress loads, span bridge principles, and they've gone out by themselves to bid, and they've determined that $4 million is too high? So 4.1 I saw was the 4.1 million is the cost of the bridge. We subtract the 1.3 GOCO grant, that is 2.8 million. Then, Durango city residents really only pay 1/3 of the cost of that. So we're really getting a $4.1 million bridge for less than $1 million. That's 75% off. I think that's fiscally responsible. Yeah. And I did take the time yesterday to visit with Councilwoman Baxter. She displayed excellent listening skills. I really appreciate how earnest she was in that. And then today I went online and I looked at the presentation that was very professionally given here, and it described some of the options she was mentioning. it sounds as though the one that's been chosen is the most fiscally responsible. So, in closing, we need to consider those who lack the capacity to attend this meeting. I sat back there, I didn't see anybody come in a wheelchair. I didn't see anybody come in with small children. I didn't see an elderly person that was moving so slowly as they would be threatened by traffic. In my letter to the editor, I referenced Dr. King, and one of his quotes is, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. And so I asked the City Council to approve this bridge as planned so people can bike, run, walk, and enjoy that bridge however it is that they can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Former Mayor Sweetie Marbury, former councilor, thank you.
I'm Sweetie Marbury, and I live at 2256 West 2nd Avenue. And I want to thank the Parks and Rec for an excellent presentation tonight with their PowerPoint. I also attended the Parks meeting on February the 12th and listened to many comments from folks. The Animas River Trail is at the finish line. And after 10 plus years and hundreds of hours of board meetings and citizen input, here we are at the finish line. Councils voted in 2012 and 2017 to finish that project, specifically to protect pedestrians with connectivity to the north and to the south. Grants were applied for and grants were awarded. The budget is a go. This council has also voted for the budget, which encompassed the bridges. The bridges are, in my opinion, the safest way to cross 32nd Street. I am so concerned because I spent many Sundays down at 32nd Street observing the existing bridge, as Ann Marquardt talked about, and the flashing lights, to observe bicycle kids never getting off their bikes to push the button, a woman with a baby stroller hurriedly crossing 32nd Street for fear of distracted drivers. And I heard the statistics tonight from the police department about tickets. Well, we all know that we have distracted drivers in Durango. You know, the public will not trust any city council decisions if there's any backtracking on this, because we promised the public that we would protect them from other councils. The volume of traffic will expand, and we know that going north is a given. Durango Superintendent Dan Snowberger advocated for these bridges. Needham PTO and Riverview PTO asked for protections for their children. The bridges will do just that. They will protect children. They will protect seniors and baby strollers and tourists, as we promised from the past. It's not an either or situation about spending public money for completion of the bridges, or a park in Three Springs that was suggested, and other really great ideas that we have for Durango. I'm asking that you honor the process that has happened before you were elected to City Council. And remember that the Animas River Trail is your legacy. Go forward with this promise project. Support the completion of the bridges. Protect that little child out there that someday will ride a bike without the supervision of his parent. Thank you, because after you are gone, the legacy of the Animas River Trail will continue. Thank you.
Mike Freeburg.
Oh, and I have one more comment. I want to apologize to Amber Blake for the rudeness of John Simpson. That is really uncalled for. I found his remarks to be distasteful, offensive, and inappropriate at City Council meeting to attack a staff member. Thank you, and I am the former mayor.
Well, good evening. I'm happy to be here once again. Sort of. You know, it's difficult to imagine Durango, for me, without the Animas River Trail. And you know, as the sections were completed over the over 35 years that I've been around here, It's been great rejoicing in them as they've been done. And I've not gone north up to the new section yet because I'm waiting. I want to wait until it's done. And I want to ride my bike or inline skate or run or walk across whatever it is you end up with doing there over 32nd Street Bridge. I would have been fine with it going under 32nd Street Bridge, but I am not okay with it going across 32nd Street Bridge, period. I'm not okay with that. And I've told you why. The solution now is ready to go. It may not be perfect for everyone here, for many reasons. I get it. I went there yesterday. I looked around, really to just sense like, what are we really talking about here? The bridge, the structure. I looked at the idea of coming up with the path behind the rec center, which would then go out onto 2nd, which the lady showed photographs of. And, that's all fine until you get out onto 2nd. And I hate to differ, but it's a very narrow street. And it's not as wide as most streets in Durango. There isn't very much room on the street. And then the path would go directly in front of 3 or 4 houses there. And what do you do there? I mean, so that's not a separated trail. It just isn't. It isn't possible to put that there and have it be an actual separated trail. This truly is, and I appreciate the comments of Doug and of Dick, that this is an opportunity. This is a legacy piece. And when I think back, and the other day as I drove past the park where the new sewage treatment plant, water reclamation plant is located, and it still just sort of breaks my heart because that is a legacy forever there. We had a chance to move it 35 years ago, and then a few years ago. It was too expensive, we get it. But this isn't too expensive. It's expensive, but this isn't too expensive. So, thank you for getting this done now.
Ellen Stein.
Standing here. Hi, good evening. I also want to address John Simpson's comments. I'm going to speak about the bridge, but I just want to take a minute to thank our city council for their hard work. I may not agree with all of you all the time, but I know you put in countless hours and time into this job, and it's a really hard one. And I think his comments are unconscionable, and he left. So there you go. So anyway, my name is Ellen Stein. I live at 33 East 4th Avenue, 3314 East 4th Avenue. I always get so nervous. 1 block east of the 33rd Street put-in. I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. I use 32nd Street every day, either on foot, bike, or car. I am also a member of the Multimodal Advisory Board representing the disabled, disadvantaged, and senior members of our community. I participated over the years in all the planning processes involving hundreds of citizens that prioritize projects like the Animas River Trail and the 2 pedestrian bridges. At last week's Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting, someone asked, what if nothing is done? I'll tell you what if nothing is done. We will be backtracking on years of dedicated public funding supporting our beloved Animas River, the central park of Durango, and the trail that runs her banks. We will be abandoning a commitment to the safety of our citizens, increased accessibility, improved connectivity, and mobility throughout our city. Safety is government's #1 responsibility. It is not safe for children, seniors, the disabled, and all residents and visitors who use our trails. We will be signaling to our largest recreational funder, Great Outdoors Colorado, that Durango no longer prioritizes our cycling culture, the foundation and cycling and recreation culture, the foundation of our community's spirit, and heritage. We're celebrating 50 years of the Iron Horse Bike Classic in 2021. And if you read Barbara McLaughlin's column online, you saw that our recreation economy in Colorado generates $37 billion a year in consumer spending, and that will only grow. We'll be abandoning our commitment to the multimodal vision to create a fully connected transportation network that provides for an outstanding transit, bicycling, and walking community in Durango. And a measure of achieving this vision is that a middle school age child is able to safely and conveniently access transit and bike or walk independently throughout Durango and its environs. Councilor Baxter, who previously supported the project as chair of the multimodal board in 2017, says the project does not address the need to cross from south to north to the 32nd Street put-in or southeast to northwest. This was never its intent. And in fact, she and other councilors have supported funding in this year's budget to address those safety concerns, the length of 32nd Street from North Main to County Road 250. It's not an either or. Nor is the project an either or with the Camino crossing, which the 3 advisory boards, how much time?
Wrap it up.
I'm out? Oh, shoot, okay. So Camino is funded, or is recommended for funding in 2022. These projects cost money. Main Avenue, $2 million. Home Depot to Sailborn, $6 million. Camino, $4.3 million. Please fulfill the wishes of citizens and the vision of a fully connected Animas River Trail with no at-grade crossings. It will forever be the showcase of our community.
Thank you. Okay, we've had some great public participation. I do want to see if there's anyone else who would wish to participate. Oh, great, thank you. Okay, Emily Lloyd.
Hi. I'm Emily Lloyd. I live at 3160 East 3rd Ave. That's essentially where the bridge will cross East 3rd and cross the river across to behind City Market. I went to the Parks and Rec meeting last week, and initially going in, I had obviously seen the picture in the newspaper and was quite upset with the overall scale. That being said, when I started, I didn't really think we had quite the safety issues. And after being in that meeting, I think I was swayed a bit regarding the need to actually have bridges to cross, definitely 32nd. So I definitely support 32nd crossing, but the bridge that crosses the river, I just kind of see as a blight. I don't disagree with the need to cross the river, but the way it's designed is it's just very imposing. You know, they chose to put it, you know, the need to have it so high, but also so close to the 32nd bridge. They didn't use, you know, distance to their advantage. You know, we talked about the number of cars that cross 32nd. I mean, there'll be, you know, thousands of people that will look at this bridge every single day. And I just see it as a blight. That being said, I do like ideas where we are using that longer sight line to maybe closer to the 31st. I think that little bit of distance could make a huge difference. And also, we bear quite a burden. I know the bridge being behind City Market does impact less people. That being said, the people on East 3rd, all of our parking all summer long is impacted by boaters that are going to the 33rd put-in. And we also have a really beautiful beach right there at the 32nd bridge that this new bridge will directly impact. And there's no other beaches all the way down to that new one they put in near 29th. Sorry, yeah? Oh, that's my 30 seconds. Okay, I was like, what are you going to do? We do bear an impact. With all the boaters, there's noise from City Market, there's lights on the back of City Market, so keep that in mind. We do take one for the team already. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John Agnew, please.
Hello, John Agnew. I'm also a resident of 3160 East 3rd Avenue. Thank you, everybody, for your passion and your time. We love this trail as much as anybody. We use it daily. We cross 32nd Street Bridge daily. I walk up there to get my groceries, walk back. You know, it seems like the facility for that crossing there is already there. You know, it's the structure is built, you know, and it's such a beautiful view when you look down the river and see all the rocks, snow on top of them, and it just breaks my heart to think that we're going to be staring at this monster steel bridge going across right there that's just completely unnecessary. You know, there's a pathway on each side of the bridge now that crosses 32nd. I'm in favor of the one that's further down, which gives you yet another crossing, so you could still have 32nd Street Bridge on both sides, and then, you know, several blocks down have the other bridge that crosses the river. It just seems like it's not necessary. It's such a beautiful town, and for us to kind of, I think, force this bridge in just because it was planned by previous people before us, it just seems like there's a better way, you know. It seems like we can figure this one out without building some, you know, mega structure right there. It's going to be at least 35 feet to the top of the bridge. It's really going to be a monster. And, you know, I'm of course concerned about safety, but I think that there's ways that we can kind of use the topography to our advantage and make it beautiful to, you know, I think there's just a way for us to do that. Let's keep thinking about it. Let's not rush it through because it has to be done. We have to go over, we have to go under. It seems like we're pushing this through without really, you know, kind of figuring out all of the options that are on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Charles Shaw.
Hi there. My name is Charles Shaw, and I live at 1309 East 3rd Ave in Durango. And I would consider myself a die-hard bike commuter. I have biked through that intersection for 8 years in a row when I used to live in the valley. Would bike every day all over town, ride my son to school every day. He goes to Mountain Middle, and we live downtown now. And when I think of all the priorities of town to make this a good bike commuting town, I would say this is almost near the bottom of my priority. And that if we start doing bridges like this to solve some problems, we're never going to get to where we need to be to make this a great bike commuting town. And if we spend $4 million on one intersection, which honestly, I would probably ride it a couple times to see how ill-conceived it was, but then I would just take the road like I always do on 2nd Ave, which is better than the bike path, which is in total disrepair on the other side of the river. And then I ride every day my son to school, and we bounce down that Animas River Trail. So we're not even maintaining what we have. And I'm not sure why that is, but I'm much more concerned with spending the money in places that are going to make this a safe and good bike commuting town. And this seems like a waste of money, even if it is free or we got the money for free. I'm not sure where it came from, but I don't even like wasting somebody else's money on stuff. And then further, I think if we're ever going to be a town that gets out of our cars, we're going to have to stop the cars. And we can't. I've been all over the world. I'm a connoisseur of bike commuting cities on the East Coast, the West Coast here, Europe, and there are no overpasses. They don't do that. You couldn't make a great bike commuting city if you put overpasses and underpasses over every road. You have to stop the cars, and you can't just have a city that's awesome for cars to drive 35 miles an hour and have the bikes go out of the way. So does that mean?
30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds. So anyway, please don't waste the money on this and put the money, I mean, we don't have one crosswalk on North Main. This council and planning department has said they want to make North Main nice, and all these businesses are starting to invest money there, and there's not one place to cross the street between the rec center and 32nd. There should be a crosswalk on every single one of those intersections, and the sign like Reachway has and Telluride has, it says, hey, it's state law to stop for pedestrians. Let's make this a great bike community town. It doesn't cost any money. It's almost free, and let's do that. And please don't waste the money on this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else who would like to speak this evening? We do have more time. If there's someone else who would like to join us. Okay. We have two. Sorry, you can wait, Mike. Thanks. Beat you to it.
My name is Beth McCoy, and I live at 3260 East 4th Avenue and have for 51 years. I can't remember, and I'd like to say that I agree with Ann and a couple over there on their views of the bridge. I can't remember a time when I had a hard time or had an extremely long wait to cross the intersection of 32nd Street and East 3rd. And I usually had small children and at least a couple of dogs with me. People are usually very kind about stopping, and the train doesn't cause more than a couple of minutes delay. I've never considered the crossing dangerous, even though traffic has greatly increased over the decades. And now there's even a flashing pedestrian crossing sign for added safety. I don't believe I've ever heard anyone from the neighborhood complaining about the crossing at the intersection. So I'd like to know why we need such a ridiculous looking 3-part intrusive bridge. Also, the encasing, the thing above the railroad track doesn't seem very practical. I don't know how much money is the city willing to pay to clean that thing all the time. And now with the new oil run engine, 493, I've heard it likes to spew oil all over the place, so that would be even more clean. And so much for it still being scenic. That thing is ugly. Sorry. The bridge has always acted as a connector between the two sides of the trail, and I think most people consider it a part of the trail. I'd like to make it totally clear that I am opposed to the bridge being built, but if it has to be, I would go with the 31st Street crossing. It's less invasive and it's more pleasingly aesthetic. People take pictures down there at the bridge all the time for the scenery and the train. And with that thing there, I'm sorry, that's no. So I don't want to see you make the same mistake you did with the intersection, with the art at the intersection of 55160. So please put this to the public vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Mike Benton. Sorry about that.
Hi, my name's Mike Fenton, 321 East 37th Street. Thanks for the opportunity to speak, and I wanted to thank Scott McLean for bringing those 2011 maps. And I think one of the reasons that a lot of people are here and why there's a bit of an uproar is because the bridge design that we're currently considering, or that you're considering, isn't one of those that were shown on the map. This is a different design. this really doesn't seem that it was vetted by the public. The options that were vetted by the public were the ones in the 2011 map that he showed earlier. And if I recall correctly, the Parks and Rec Advisory Board suggested the going under the 32nd Street Bridge and wrapping around and crossing, doing a new bridge or a new pathway across the river there, but that would have been north of 32nd Street. And then the staff, I believe, recommended staying on the west side behind the rec center, and that was an option. And then finally, I think the councilors voted to cross at 30th or 31st Street, land, cross at grade, and cross 32nd Street with a simple bridge across 32nd Street. And so I think those were kind of the three main options that were considered, and this design was never really considered. So it looks like we're kind of fast tracking this, and now that we've seen renderings of it and know how much it costs, it makes sense to give it a lot of consideration and maybe hold some more public meetings or something like that. But it seems like this is getting fast tracked for some reason when I thought we had an option picked. When I saw the design and saw where it was located, I was kind of surprised because I thought we were going with City Council's option of crossing at 30th, the river at 30th, and then crossing 32nd Street on the west side. So I guess it makes sense to give this a lot of consideration and maybe look at other options now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to join us this evening for public participation? Okay, one more. Seth Burtney.
So I'm Seth Burtney. I'm on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board and have been pretty intimately involved in looking at all things Parks and Rec for the last 5 years. And the biggest issue that I want to convey is there is opportunity cost. There's this argument, we're just going to do it all. We're not going to do it all. Parks and Rec has a $330 million wish list. We may do 10% of that, maybe. Multimodal has a $160 million wish list, which are mostly related to safety and navigation and mobility of people across this town. We're going to do 10% of that, maybe. If indeed we're talking about improving the safety and security of the people around here, we've got a $500 million worth of want-to-haves, and we're going to do 10% of that, or so. We should make some really, really thoughtful decisions on what we're going to invest in, because 9 out of 10 things won't get done. I'll stop there.
Okay. All right, so with that, I really appreciate everyone being here and everyone taking the time to communicate so thoughtfully. Alternative approaches, ideas, thoughts on the whole process. I think that's exactly what we intended to do through these processes, is have these public outreach, have this engagement. The renderings have been presented, staff is presenting for us to answer questions, and this is exactly what we wanted to do. So I thank you guys for taking the time to be here and for communicating with us. We'll again have 2 more opportunities for that, but I just really think that this is a great community process that we're going through, and I'm really thankful that we're doing it this way and we're taking the time. That's exactly what it's meant to be. It is unfortunate that we have to now and then experience some negative comments, and the most unfortunate thing about that is that as a council, I can tell you we have tried with honestly hours of discussions, one-on-one, communicating. Really great ideas are brought up by some of these citizens that come forward and bring forth ideas. And often they're very, very powerful and worth considering. And in the case of one individual's comments tonight, we are considering those recommendations and feedback very seriously, because some of them are items that the council feels strongly about. We haven't gotten to those yet. They are on our study session agenda to address. We want to address those. But as you can tell, we have a little bit of a full agenda right now, and so we have literally scheduled ourselves out 6 months. And so it feels like a bit of an attack when you take the time and you listen one-on-one and you give people time and energy. And in this small community, when everyone knows each other and we know each other by names, to have that personal condemnation is just unfortunate. So I thank you guys for the people who spoke up against that. Thank you for that, and thank you for your support and for communicating with us tonight. And I also wanted to ask Councilor Baxter, you said you might have some questions.
Well, I do, but I'm wondering if maybe we want to hold those two till our March 2nd conversation, so that we do it all at the same time.
Do you feel good about that?
After having heard all the feedback? Is that, I mean,
sounds like a good idea.
These questions can wait. They're not at time of the essence kind of questions.
I think actually it's a really good idea to do that when we've had all this listening sessions.
Okay.
Okay, let's do that.
Sounds good.
Okay, with that, let's conclude our public participation. So we're going to move on, audience, to consent agenda if you'd like to leave before we do that. Thank you. We're going to reconvene.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. We are moving on to item number 6, review of the consent agenda. This section is intended to allow City Council by a single motion to approve items that are considered routine or non-controversial, and there will be no separate discussion of these items unless a councilor requests that an item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Mr. Florian, will you please read the consent agenda items?
Items 6.1 through 6.3 are approval of minutes. Item 6.1 is for the special city council meeting on January 7th, 2020. 6.2 is for the special meeting on January 13th, 2020. And then 6.3 was for the regular meeting on February 4th, 2020. Items 6.4 and 6.5 are discussion and possible action items. Item 6.4 concerns a resolution authorizing an additional appropriation to the general fund for the addition of a systems analyst 1 position funded by the Durango Fire and Protection Services. Item 6.5 regards resolutions authorizing appropriation in the Water Capital Projects Fund and Sewer Capital Projects Fund for additional scope of services for the collections system and distribution system assessment projects.
Thank you very much. Do we have any councilor that would like to remove an item?
I have a question about item 6.4.
Okay.
And I had a question also about that, but also 6.5, so.
Okay, motion for the first few items?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exceptions of items 6.4 and 6.5.
Second.
Mr. Florian?
Mayor Pro Tem Bricky,
Yes.
Councilor Bettine,
Yes.
Councilor Baxter,
Yes.
Councilor Noseworthy,
Yes.
and Mayor Youssef.
Yes. Moving on to 6.4?
Yeah, I think maybe the interim city manager can answer this question for me. I just want to be clear on something. It says in the purpose background that, originally you had the DFPD had this position. It funded its first full-time technical support position, and it worked with city information services. And now it says that in 2019, the position became open, and Information Services and DFPD leadership took the opportunity to discuss, and they agreed that moving the DFPD technical position into Information Services and housing the new position at the Carnegie Building with IS staff would be the optimal resolution. Does that mean this is a transfer of one position, or do we have one position that's now going to be added to the general fund, and there will be a new position in the DFPD. I just want to clarify that.
That's a great question, and thank you for asking to make that clear. So the position was originally with DFPD under their budget, and the person is no longer with DFPD, and so this was an opportunity to create a new position within the Information Systems Department, which will be funded through DFPD. So DFPD will pay for this position. It will still only be one position. However, it streamlines operations and communication because the system is, DFPD is within the city's system, so it was always like a telephone game.
Right, so I just wanted to clarify that the FTE will not increase.
Correct. It increases on the city's side. It's one new FTE on the city's side, paid for by DFPD. Because the DFP, right, so, but it's not, you're not having two IS people.
Right, but I understand that. We'll have to think about how we communicate that to the public, that we're not necessarily expanding this position is covered.
It's a contracted
to another source, because otherwise it will look like one new added
It'll look like a new FTE, just like the SRO that we just did for PD.
So that's a communications issue of how to say it's funded elsewhere.
Yep, we can do that.
And I just wanted to be clear that the $90,000 covers all costs, like all the insurance costs and all the benefits costs and everything, and that $90,000 will be credited back to that department. So the department will not show an increase in expenses in their payroll.
The department will show an increase in their expenses, but they will also show the same amount of increase in their revenue. Okay. And then will be each year, depending on what happens with salaries or positions, the rate of pay, the cost of that position is billed to DFPD, so that revenue comes back into the general fund to pay for that general fund position.
So that funding will also pay for the pension and everything that we
Pays
provide,
for everything.
Okay, great.
And also, let me just clarify, computers, desk, any kind of technical support.
They're covering that as well.
Excellent. Thank you. So I would make a motion to pass 6.4 on the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Perhaps we can have a discussion on 6.5 as well and pass them at the same time, or?
Okay.
That works for me. If you'd like to.
There's a motion and a second on the floor.
Correct, actually.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Mr. Florine?
And real quick, who seconded that motion?
I did.
Chris?
Bettine.
Sorry, I had a frog in my throat.
Counselor Bettine.
Yes.
Counselor Baxter.
Yes.
Counselor Noseworthy.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Bricky.
Yes.
And Mayor Youssef.
Yes. Okay, 6.5, please.
So my question was, and this is just my not understanding or not knowing, what is a water modeling system?
I am going to ask Levi Lloyd, the Director of City Operations, to come answer that question.
Imagine that.
Members of Council, Levi Lloyd, Director of City Operations. So the water model is an update. It's something, we have some water modeling software. This is an update. It looks at the different pressure zones within the city of Durango, make sure that they're all operating at optimum efficiency. This also puts us in line for a feasibility study for small hydro recapture at all of our pressure reducing stations. It would only offset the cost of the electronics that we have in those lift stations, but this is necessary before we can move forward with that feasibility.
Okay. Well, I really like the idea of the small hydro recapture. I know we've talked about that in other situations too, so that's great. Thank you. So I would suggest that we pass item 6.5 on the consent agenda. I'll make a motion to do so.
I will second.
Further discussion? Mr. Florine. Sorry, I'm used to Ms. Phillips.
Counselor Bettine.
Yes.
Counselor Baxter.
Yes.
Counselor Noseworthy.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Bricky.
Yes.
And Mayor Youssef.
Okay, we're moving on to our public hearings tonight. We have 2 public hearings. Please note, this is an opportunity for the citizens to provide formal input into our decision-making process. It's intentionally organized to ensure transparency and fairness for all parties involved. We welcome all public testimony for our public hearings. We do ask that it be relevant to the issue at hand, and we also ask that we limit that to 3 minutes as well. We're going to start with section 9.1, which is a legislative and policy-related hearing to consider the adoption of the City of Durango and La Plata County Strategic Plan on Homelessness. We will start with a staff report. This will be followed by public testimony. I will then receive questions from council. We'll have a response from city staff, and I'll look for a motion from council. And with that, we'll start with Mr. Hall.
Good evening, councilors. Kevin Hall, Assistant City Manager. I'm going to keep the presentation fairly brief. If you remember, on January the 21st, we had a joint work session with La Plata County Commissioners. We had our subject matter experts in the house that evening as well to present on the plan pretty thoroughly. The plan was revised based on the input per the agenda documentation provided. The changes that were requested, I believe, were covered in the revised draft that you received. We also provided minutes from that meeting, as well as a little bit of additional background information. You know, this process has been underway for, in earnest, about a year, but quite frankly, a number of years. The discussion on how to treat some of the things that the community has seen relative to the homeless community and improving the situation in the community. I believe the plan represents a very robust public process that occurred, not only with our subject matter experts, but a lot of advocates, a number of them who are in the room tonight. And this is kind of the culmination of that work. It wasn't my intention to provide an overview of the plan again, because we did go through that just a couple of weeks ago, and it's in the study, it's in the agenda doc. However, just a couple of quick slides. I just wanted to reiterate a couple of things what the plan is. It provides a number of strategies to effectively address homelessness. And again, this is work that was put together not only with the Athena group, who have consultant expertise in this area, but all of our agencies in the community, organizations and individuals who have been touched by or have assisted in the homeless community over the years really played a key role in what this document looked like. It was interesting in that we worked closely with La Plata County, and myself and the county manager played a role from a perspective of integrating with not only the council but the commissioners and process, but not so much in terms of the subject matter information. That was really left to the folks in the room who knew the subject, and this plan is largely a reflection of that. So again, a systematic approach to keeping people housed or to get them into housing as quickly as possible. I think one of the things that was identified was a need for greater coordination among agencies, organizations, individuals, and the local governments. There was certainly a recognition that there is a great deal of agencies and organizations and individuals, as well as the local governments, who do a lot of different things related to homelessness, but the coordination among them could improve to essentially get a better value for the resources committed. And you know, it doesn't necessarily, my takeaway on this plan is we should expect to see the community continue to work forward, and I'm going to talk a little bit about plan implementation, but I think you should expect to see resource requests over time in the coming years in order to implement the plan. And I know we've talked about some of those. There's some very specific asks in this plan document. However, the plan document in and of itself is a roadmap. It is not a formal funding request, and any type of request for funding will have to be put together through a formal ask. And that will be the details, not unlike some of the other things we do. It will come to you with a lot of detail. What we have in this plan, I think, is a best case estimate of costs, best case idea of what might happen, and those are going to change as we move forward. What I want to just touch on real quickly is the action items, and if you recall, the plan called out tiered action items, and really tier one were the things that appear doable in the next 12 months, 15 months, already have organizations or individuals behind them, they have a general sense of cost. There's a variety of those. The tier one are a little further out, or things that will happen later on. But I think this captures in essence what the tier one strategies are, and there's a significant amount of them here. I'm not going to walk through all of these, but off to the right of the partners, and to the left are the actions, and you can, if you tie the colors back to the actions, you can see that everybody has a role in this thing. And that's one of the key takeaways of this planning document, is it's really about coordination and partnership. And, you know, the things that you see over here in yellow, which is city and county, although I would suspect we will participate in other components of this as well, but in terms of maybe taking lead or a partnership role, the discussion of camp, permanent camp, organizing it, enforcement, ambassadors, things along those lines are one of the first things that the ask is of the city to participate in. I'll touch on plan implementation a little bit right now, in that there's a number of things already occurring in the community since we started down the drafting of this plan, and I'm not able to call out everybody who's participated, but I will say the Neighbors in Need Alliance, Manna Soup Kitchen, a variety of other folks have really stepped forward to move a variety of initiatives forward here over the last handful of months and moving forward from here. There is an interim working group that is scheduled to meet on February the 28th, which is going to be individuals from a lot of these organizations that will sit down and start talking about the recommendations that you find in the plan. And I see that there's a fair amount of momentum here. For me, one of the primary takeaways is it isn't the community saying, city, you need to do X, or county, you need to do Y. It's a recognition that all of us have to work together, and the city and the county are going to be really good at certain components of that, whether it's funding or process or supporting grants, or sitting at the table with sleeves rolled up. But it's going to be our subject matter experts, the folks with the real passion on this particular issue, are really going to move this forward. And I think the commitment is in this plan to say the city's on board. It doesn't commit us to any particular funding. I think there's some real expectations in here on funding. But that will have to come back to us with a very formal request. It'll be a conversation in terms of how we pay for it, whether we can pay for it, who's partnering in it. There's already almost $100,000 in grants that are being worked on right now by the advocates and some sponsorship. But generally it hasn't been city pay for this, county pay for that. We're going to work on this, and we're going to bring it back to you in concept for consideration for specific action items. So, with that, the recommendation here is by motion to approve the plan, knowing that we're going to see this come back to us on a very consistent basis as action items are kind of perfected through the interim working group or the permanent group that comes forward after that, or it's Nina. Another thing I might point out, just since I'm here right now before we hear from the community, is you might recall the city agreed to partially fund the lockers program last year. That project is now going to come online. There's going to be an installation next week and a groundbreaking shortly after that with a little recognition to the community. And certainly there's folks in the room who are a little closer to this than I am. However, staff's working closely with all of them on a variety of these initiatives, and will continue to do so. So with that, we didn't have a public hearing as part of a study session. We can't do that. So there's folks in the room who really wanted to share some thoughts on this. We only received one written comment since we posted it online in the last couple of weeks, and that was really in support of the plan, and I believe you also saw those comments. So with that, I'll step away and let you guys continue with your public hearing.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, I'm going to open the public hearing, and we're going to start with Mr. Mike Todd, please.
Just a reminder, when I raise my hand, you still have 30 seconds left.
Gotcha.
All right.
All right. Thank you. And I want to first thank the council. You have been a breath of fresh air in terms of dealing with the homeless. Your concern, you have been involved in this process, and I really see the compassion coming out. And I think we're all really grateful for, again, your concern. And also for supporting the Athena report, because again, I think it took that kind of action to get us all to work together. I want to talk a little bit about the plan, because I've been involved, and I'm with Nina, I'm with Manna, and I'm with Pat, and now I'm with the working group, so I'm going to stay very involved in this. I think the plan is very comprehensive. It's got a lot of meat we have to put on it yet, but I think in terms of tier 1 and the tier 1 strategies, I think it's important. Second, this is a lot of groups working together. It's a wide swath of the community that actually work together and not working in silos. So I think we have actually sort of cracked the nut on that, and that kind of talks about one of the tier 1 strategies. The goal of all of this, to me, is to improve the lives of the homeless, to assist them in moving forward and getting housing, as well as lots of other services. It's not just housing, it's lots of other things that we have to do for them. And I think this plan, as we implement it, will make a stab at that. We're not going to eliminate homeless because it's a societal structural problem in large part, and it's got some individual components. There's two major components in Tier 1. One is the camp, and I think maybe other people are going to talk about the camp. It's really a self-managed camp. And again, Nina is already working on a proposal. We have something sent into the Colorado Health Foundation in terms of funding. What I want to talk about is a navigation center. Partly because the navigation center, there is no organization in Durango at this point that really does what a navigation center will do, which essentially is to do intake, to determine what it is that people need, and to get those people into those kinds of services, and then to collect some data to determine if we need other kinds of programs. MANA does it to some extent, but not in a comprehensive way. We don't have the staffing to do it. But again, we do provide lots of support services. But we need a lot more if you're going to move people now out of homelessness into housing. You can't just create a bunch of apartments and think, oh yeah, we're just going to put them there. It takes a lot more work to get them to that point. So the navigation center is critical. I think having a director is critical because to me that's going to be the czar of homelessness that can keep the process moving. Because again, I think without having some kind of czar, some kind of director, and a coordinating council, this process is going to die. Yeah, individual groups are working on things, but I think for the first time I saw all of these groups working together and really cooperating with one another to solve the problem that we all feel very, very concerned about. So again, I want to thank you for your support. It has been amazing. And thank you, Amber, for lending us Kevin, because he's put in a lot of time. So again, thank you very much, and I hope you move forward in terms of supporting the plan, you know, conceptually as well as with money. We do need some startup funds to get this navigation center and this camp off the ground.
Thank you very much. Donna Mae Bucket.
Thank you so much, councilors. Mayor Yusuf. I'm Donna Mae Bacot, and my address is 4538 County Road 250. I came because in 2017, on my first appearance to the council, I was a nervous wreck. I had never appeared in front of a community the leaders of our community. But what I have seen since then has been an extraordinary improvement of attitude, camaraderie, and I can get to you very easily by email or phone or whatever. And this is something that Community Compassion Outreach has really depended upon. So 2019 was a lot easier for us to navigate and implement initiatives. And I'm very happy that we have a few of our programs included. And our day work program, I understand that we've through Jocelyn, she hired about 10 people already. Is that Richard? About that. And so that's active. And so the things that I really want to thank you for is that you have agreed to at least have the community come together and create strategies. One of the things that I'd like you to know about is that to get the community connected, April 20th is the forum ending homelessness. It is Community Compassion Outreach's second forum. And we are going to cover where we were in 2018 spring to where we are now in April. Because I think that is important to see the progress and then to identify where we're moving ahead. I will be sending out Eventbrites and also putting out ads in the paper for everyone to know. But it's at the Fort Lewis College ballroom, starts at 8:30 to 4. The other thing is that tomorrow at the Adventure Christian Church. Psychology of Homelessness is going to be presented by Dr. Mike Todd. And I invite everybody because I strategically wanted to have this precede the forum for the community to realize that there is more to homelessness than the person. And I think that Mike puts it into words. One thing I discovered through his presentation is that the people that are homeless have more strengths than you and I give credit. And I am just so excited to have recognized that. And there are more attributes that can be used from that population. And then finally, I'd like to ask if you would please extend the bus service from Purple Cliffs on Saturdays so that people can come to the Schneider Park and share our meals, our free meals at 12:30. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have Mike Benton on the list, but I believe he already spoke, and so he's not here, is he? Okay. Moving on then to Beth McCoy.
Beth spoke earlier as well.
Beth spoke earlier as well. Okay, there's confusion, I think, with the list. Gerald Bauman. Did that individual speak earlier as well? No? Okay. We're just flying through the list. Marsha Porter Norton.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Marsha Porter Norton. I live at 2009 Highland Avenue. As most of you know, I've been in front of the council several times and come to pretty much every single meeting I could on homelessness and on the PATH plan. I'm also a participant in NINA and have had lots of concerns over the years about not only the welfare and concern for unhoused people in our community, but for our greater Crestview neighborhood. That goes from the Needham neighborhood, Valentine Drive, all of Crestview down to Elevita. We call it Greater Crestview. And I really support this plan. This is what I really like about living in La Plata County and Durango is this whole process. The previous speaker talked about the collaboration, the capacity, the relationships. A couple of years ago, it honestly felt hopeless to me. It felt like there was a lot of blaming and a lot of hand-wringing, and this feels like a new day to me. And I know we didn't get there, we got there with a lot of help. So I also would like to thank all of you and also the commissioners, of course, for their leadership and funding. I want to thank my neighborhood representatives, who were Paul and Shannon, but also all the people who served on the PATH group. They spent a lot of their own personal time doing this. Probably had other things to be doing, but they really came together and they listened. And I want to thank the city staff, Kevin and other people that were involved, Amber, you as well, and also the Athena people, Megan and their consultants working with them, and I think Jen is in the audience. So I really felt listened to. I started being super concerned about wildfire during the drought, super concerned about people using trails in the Over and Mountain Park, but also super concerned about people who are unhoused. And so I feel like this gets us to a really good place. I do think that as we go forward, looking 6 months to a year, we really need to stick to those measurements and accountability so we know this just isn't process for process and a new hire for a new hire. But I love the plan because it has things that we can measure and target. So we're going to know in 6 months how many jobs, how many new housing vouchers, all of that. I also think we need to arc this to an overall affordable housing plan and keeping that front and center in our community. But I'm just really proud of everybody involved. I attended a couple meetings as a participant. I wasn't on the PATH group, but I support it 100%. And I think we can't go home now, folks. This is not the end, it's the beginning, and we need to remember that. So I just want to thank everybody in the room, and particularly people that were unhoused that came to many of the meetings. I really learned a lot from that interaction and that process. So I support it, and thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe that's all I have for public hearing on this issue. Okay, great. With that, we'll take questions from council. And Kevin, if you maybe want to join us in case we have questions. Anybody?
I do, sure.
Okay.
First of all, I also want to recognize the enormous amount of work and community work and the consultants' work and the constituents and the work in this, as well as the staff. So I think we've made incredible progress. Kevin, I'm picking up on your note that expect a resource request, and I think you said something about overtime, and I myself want to encourage you to get those resource requests in sooner rather than later, because I think what I saw in this was and I will get to my question, was a reasonable amount of expenditures, and I also recognize that we as a council knew we were going to have to appropriate money to achieve this plan. We set that as one of our goals. We just didn't have kind of the numbers. So my question is, recognizing your desire to have, a thought-out plan, when might we actually anticipate seeing a budget appropriation? Because I would like to say that a plan without money associated with it tends to sit on the shelf, and I don't think anyone wants that. So I'm just trying to encourage you to come back with a realistic target for when we might be asked to appropriate dollars.
I'm not going to be able to give you a date tonight. However, between the work that Nina is doing right now, as well as the fact that the interim working group will meet on February the 28th, which is less than a couple weeks away, that will start in on those initial tier 1 concepts. That will have to be vetted before anything come before you in terms of understanding what the real numbers look like. So spring might be a first time, but certainly I think we'll be, aside from some special appropriation requests, I guess, or funding requests, it would really come together for the 2021 budget, I think, probably most earnestly, because that's a summertime when we start working on the budget, fall. And I think the work of the working group as well as the work of Nina will really start coming together over the next couple of months now that if the plan is adopted. I didn't say this earlier, but the county is going to take action next Tuesday on the plan.
So could I clarify just for a minute? If you were thinking that the request would be coming into the next budget process, would that mean that the whole hiring of this coordinator and the whole navigation center would not be funded until the following year?
Not necessarily. It really depends on the work that gets done between now and when that funding request would be put forth. Until the group sits down and starts hashing through these things, until they identify the specifics. The plan document, the planning process really helped put the framework together to make it a smooth process to get to the point of knowing what that funding request is. You obviously have a preliminary estimate already in the memo that came as part of the plan. I think that generally will reflect the kind of numbers. I don't think it's going to be exactly those numbers. I think it's going to change a little bit. But until we get together as a group and sit down and start hammering some of this stuff out, I just can't tell you a date certain.
So I'd like to make a suggestion that if I remember our joint meeting, county commissioners and city council correctly, that in the joint sales tax, there's a $40,000 remainder that was earmarked towards homelessness out of the $100,000.
That would be an approximation based, we would have to look at what's been spent out of that 100 towards the existing camp and transportation services.
Right. And additionally, there was $400,000 in the joint sales tax that was going to be distributed in 2020, 200,000 to the county and 200,000 to the city per our conversation and per their budget notes in their 2020 budget. So I would like to suggest that we actually don't have to wait until 2021 in order to appropriate budget money, that I think that we have some money that can be used if we find that this is the appropriate plan to adopt and that we have the right applications for it.
Similar to a comment I made a week ago in study session, it's clear there's a green light to move forward on implementing these things, and it will take the capacity and the time of the individuals participating to bring together a well thought through and thorough proposal.
Absolutely, and I'm just saying bring it on.
Yeah,
because
bring it on.
We don't have to wait till 2021. So.
How about follow up with that? Yeah, that was my understanding that this would not be a next year item, that we were simply, by taking potential action tonight, that's a signal to the county that if they adopt it, then we have available existing funds allocated this year that have been, that are certain can be prioritized not by us, but perhaps by the working group, and so we're ready for that. And if we take action tonight, the county takes action next week, the timing's right for securing those funds and allocating them as soon as we have proposals.
And my statement on 2021 is still valid.
Yeah.
And I believe there will be the need to continue the funding for whatever initiatives come forth out of Tier 1 and 2.
Absolutely, yeah. We're continuing.
I don't have any questions. I might have a statement before we vote. but-
I do have also one more question, yeah, about the permanent camp, which was moved, not a permanent structure, but a permanent camp that was moved from Tier 2 up to Tier 1. I wanted, because I hear the county talking about how this is a temporary location, and I appreciate their effort that they're doing, and they're actually making it a camp so people can weatherize their accommodations. But I'm curious when, and I know we're working with a community group, when we might anticipate recommendations for a permanent camp, given keeping in mind the conditions at the Purple Cliffs that might be adverse come spring under different conditions, and also, issues around fire mitigation. So I'm just curious when we might get a recommendation on that. And I recognize, it's many things that come into play, but I'd like a sense of that.
Well, it's been probably about 6 weeks since I provided the study we did, the windshield survey a couple of years ago to the NENA. They have a subcommittee. They've been touring. I haven't been part of those. However, short conversation with Caroline Kinzer earlier today. My understanding is they have been doing their homework. There's more to be done. It's coming together right now. Again, I can't tell you exactly what that date looks like. I think what you're going to see is a revisit of some of the sites we've already evaluated, so we're just going to have to come back to those and see whether we can peel back the challenges associated with them. So I suspect I'll be talking with the NEDA subcommittee here shortly on what it is they would like to move forward.
Thank you.
Excellent. Further questions from council? Okay, in response, then I will be looking for a motion, but let's have some comments from council before we motion. This is a pretty fundamentally important time. Councilor Bettine?
Well, I think I can't go without saying that we started this process together 3 years ago. And I think we have not always all been on the same page. It felt a lot like what Marcia Porter Norton said earlier, that there was this sense of disconnectedness, both on our council and with our staff, with the community, with the citizens that were involved in the various organizations that are made up of this group. And when you look at the people in this room and this plan that's likely to pass here soon, you see a coalition of various groups coming together in the community, and really it's something for us to celebrate, because I think to say that we've come a long way is such an understatement relative to where we are today. And I know there are people in the community, certainly the people that matter most in this conversation, who have suffered through waiting for the time to go by for us to take action. And that suffering was not in vain. I think it was necessary for us to reach this juncture where we have a point in time where we have a plan. We have a plan that's supported by all of these various entities that you read throughout this plan that have to participate in it. And I think that is really the critical piece we were missing before, was that coalition of elements, because we were hearing a lot, the city should do this, or the county should do this, or the citizens should do this, or the homeless folks should do this. And, it's all about what Kevin said earlier, which is we all are getting to do this together and doing our parts where we can. And I have a great deal of confidence that this roadmap will lead us to a different place. And we as a council get to be united behind this, which I think is a rare opportunity today in our political reality, as well as in any community in the country. So it's something for us, even though we've got a long road ahead of us to make this situation better for the homeless in our community. I really feel great about the opportunity to implement this tonight and to do it with you guys. So thank you.
Excellent.
I think that's well said, and I think the big change is, Marcia might have referenced, is not the political will or any of us on the dais here, but whether it was the process or whatever, was required via the strategic plan process to bring this group together, the nonprofit, and for you all to step up and accept that challenge of taking this whole thing forward is really the difference, I think, that was not in total coalescence before, and it certainly appears to be on a great trajectory at this point. So, yeah, I'd like to make a motion soon after comments. So.
I'd just like to acknowledge also specifically the faith-based groups that have come together in this community. That's a recent development, and I really think it's, regardless of your faith, you've joined together in putting it into action. And so I think that's vitally important. And I often say to people, I think that we could all know someone who has been without a home, is without a home, or could be without a home. And I think that's vitally important to keep that compassion going. So I appreciate so much everything that you guys have done to bring this to fruition. And yes, the work still has to continue, and hold us accountable to get the money.
I've spoken.
Okay. I am just almost overwhelmed as to where we've come, even though I know, as Marcia has said, Marcia Porter Norton noted that we are really at the beginning and that the work is ahead, but we have come a long way, and it is because of the people in this room and this community. It makes me feel so proud to be a part of this community. It really is a great thing. There's times, gosh, what we do is really, really hard work sometimes. You see it, and but and there's discord, and it's frustrating. We move slow. Sometimes you want to move faster, but you have to get everybody together on the same page. And what was really great about this process that I so thoroughly enjoyed watching was the way they included so many different groups, and they listened, and they articulated clearly the gap in service, and they were able to just figure it out for us and identify the problem and articulate the problem so that we could have a tangible path forward. It just beautiful, really. I'm just really thankful that I could be a part of that, what we've seen happen these past couple of years. So I am very anxious to approve this and go forward and continue to support it. I think your entire council is, and I believe your commissioners are as well. So I think and with the work that the community residents are doing, I think we're in a really good spot to proactively address this issue and be a role model for other communities like we are in so many other ways. So I'm very happy to see us finally here. I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the City of Durango and La Plata County Strategic Plan on Homelessness.
Second. Any further discussion? Mr. Florian.
There's a third and a fourth, I'm sure.
Councilor Noseworthy.
Absolutely, yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Bricky.
Yes.
And then Councilor Baxter.
Yes.
Councilor Bettine.
Yes.
And Mayor Youssef.
Yes. All right, thank you. We are going to move on to 9.2 if people would like to take a moment.
Yeah, it would be nice to let everybody out.
Moving on to 9.2.
Can you keep the door open?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So this is a quasi-judicial hearing to consider the granting of an easement to Fast Track Communications to install underground fiber optic communication services to 1050 Avenida del Sol. And we are going to start with the staff presentation. We'll have a public hearing and presentation from the applicant if we have one, probably not. And so we'll go ahead and start with you, Nicole.
All right, so good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Nicole Killian, Assistant Director of Community Development Department. And this is a pretty simple item. It is an
it's the temperature in here so hot.
Yeah.
So this is an easement request from Fast Track Communications up in the city social services campus. The easement will be located along the property line next to the substation and ultimately serve Hilltop House for communications, telecommunications. And so what we've been trying to do is standardize our easement process. You'll see a lot more of these in a more standard format, whether it's on social services campus or cities' other properties, including Parks and Rec properties. So we are working on that. But this one, again, is a pretty simple one. This is the exhibit. And really, it's just needing an ordinance approved by City Council. So kind of go through the ordinance language. So it's the recommendation of the city manager and the interim city manager and the city attorney that the city council by motion conduct a public hearing to consider public testimony and comment, and thereafter direct the city attorney to prepare an ordinance for the first reading at the next regularly scheduled city council meeting, authorizing the granting of a proposed easement to Fast Track Communications to install new fiber optic communication lines to the property at 1050 Avenida del Sol. And the easement width is approximately 20 feet wide. So I can answer any questions that you have.
We don't have any public hearing, right? No one?
There'll be a public hearing,
But, I mean, I'm sorry, any public testimony? There is, correct? I didn't think so. Okay, just wanted to verify. Questions, council?
So I had an interesting conversation yesterday with fiber optic installers, and their concern was that it seems like to them, over the last year, getting the approvals for installing fiber optics has actually become more and more difficult. And so I was wondering, you don't have to answer this now, but I'd like to have a little bit of information about what might have changed or created that, or what's happening with that, because this is a good alternative for a lot of people to 5G. If we could get the fiber optics in at a rate, 5G wouldn't be so necessary for us. So I'm wondering what was happening there. So like I said, I don't need to know now, but that's
I think in this case particularly, they just need that easement, and so that takes time because it's
this isn't a one-off. Okay. This is a process over quite a long period of time of a change that they've experienced in how long it takes to get approvals.
From the city?
Yes.
I guess we'll just need a little more detail, like is that for the excavation?
I can chat with you.
Or, the easement itself.
Any other questions related to this project? From council? Okay. Well then.
So if you want to put that back up there so we can read off of the thank you.
Thank you.
I would make a motion, since we already are conducting the public hearing, to direct the city attorney to prepare an ordinance for first reading at the next regularly scheduled city council meeting, authorizing the granting of the proposed easement to Fast Track Communications to install new fiber optic communication lines to the property at 1050 Avenida del Sol.
Second?
I will second.
Further discussion from council? Mr. Fleury.
Councilor Bettine.
Yes.
Councilor Baxter.
Yes.
Councilor Noseworthy.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Bricky.
Yes.
And Mayor Youssef.
Yes. Thank you. You can join us again for item 12, discussion and policy direction on marijuana hospitality, HB 19-1230.
So hello again. I'm Nicole Killian, Assistant Director, Community Development. So this item is probably a little different than what we've done for City Council in the past. We heard at the January City Council study session on priorities that you kind of set your priorities for study sessions and the other items you wanted us to bring through the administrative section of the council agenda. Also, we heard put as much detail as we can in the staff report, so I did that, but then I looked at your agenda packet and realized it was over 200 pages, so I thought I would make sure the PowerPoint at least covered some of those items as well, just because there is a lot of information in this. But we have been directed by City Council last year to undertake a public process to look at House Bill 19-1230, which is the marijuana consumption bill that was passed. And so this consumption bill became effective January 1st of 2020. So the state of Colorado can now issue licenses for marijuana consumption hospitality establishments. But jurisdictions do have to opt in for this process, and we either can opt in through ordinance and resolution, or we can opt in through a referendum, or we can at this point essentially opt out, which means we don't take any action right now. And if we don't take any action, then hospitality establishments are not allowed in the city limits. And so just a little bit of detail about hospitality establishments in HB 191230. So again, it's the social consumption bill. And again, local jurisdictions do need to opt in. And the state's licenses began January 1st. This bill, you cannot have alcohol consumption and liquor licenses on, no alcohol or liquor licenses on the same premise as a marijuana hospitality establishment. There are also no tobacco consumption on the same premise. No other marijuana sales, manufacturing, cultivation licenses are on the same, same premise. And no one under the age of 21 would be allowed on the premise. Also, no display or consumption of marijuana visible from outside the licensed premise. Not consume in a licensed retail or medical marijuana store, but may be located adjacent to a store. And there are limitations on amount of transactions. And so House Bill 191230 offers two different options for establishments. It offers a marijuana hospitality establishment, which I'll kind of go into more detail on, but essentially that's a bring your own product, so you can't purchase products. And this could also include mobile hospitality establishments. And there's a retail marijuana hospitality and sales establishment. And this is an establishment that you can actually purchase product and also consume it on the same premise. So two different types of licenses. Just doing our review, what staff's done is we've done a lot of research, tried to contact other jurisdictions to see what they're doing, really looked at the House bill, and also just kind of been looking at how we've been handling marijuana businesses in the city limits since 2008. But possible businesses that could come under this type of license, we could see spas and hair salons. Maybe somebody wants to go and have use THC infused massage oil when they get a massage. Maybe outdoor tours could offer places where people can bring their own products and smoke during a hiking or water sports or fishing expedition. Wellness centers might offer these types of products or let people bring their own. Food and beverage establishments, which is the one we hear the most of, but again, there's a lot of other options. Hotel and motel establishments, where you might see hotels that just start allowing marijuana smoking floors or rooms or the whole hotel. Mobile tour companies, social clubs, and then also events might be wanting to get licenses for this type of use. So again, the two types of use, the first one, this one I call the bring your own marijuana hospitality establishments. So it allows for consumption, but, and it can be a mobile. So again, it could be a mobile bus that takes people around to different establishments. They can purchase their products and consume on the bus, but they cannot purchase on the bus. No marijuana sales or exchanges, so bring your own, and establishments cannot infuse products with marijuana, so they cannot do their own infused products. You have to bring your own product. If you're doing a mobile establishment, under state rules, you have to have registration as a mobile marijuana consumption vehicle. They do require surveillance cameras, GPS tracking, and route manifest systems cannot be visible from outside the vehicle. So the vehicle has to have some sort of tinted glass so you can't really see what's going on inside. And then also it has to be ventilated, and the driver has to be physically separated so the driver's not in the same area as the consumers. So this is just an example of a tour company out of Denver and Los Angeles that does offer the mobile tours right now. And so then the other use is the retail sales and establishment. It can be located in an isolated portion of a retail food establishment. So you could have a restaurant, and in the back portion, you could have a 21 and over area of that restaurant. Establishment cannot infuse products with marijuana, so they have to get that from another infused products manufacturer. Only marijuana products sold at establishments can be consumed on premise, so you can't bring your own to this establishment. And they can purchase marijuana from a licensed retail store, infused products manufacturer, or a cultivation facility. And so example in West Hollywood of a cannabis cafe where you can consume product. So currently, this is what we currently have. We allow for retail and medical marijuana stores. We have testing labs, and we have a transporter license, which these are the people that can transport between the cultivation and infused products or between the retail stores. We do not allow in the city limits cultivation facilities. We did have one that came in before we changed that rule, but that has since closed, so we no longer have a cultivation facility in the city limits. And we also do not allow infused products manufacturing facilities. And if you ever want the history of that, I've been working on this since 2007, so I can give you some of that history. And just, I like to show this photo, the Durango Herald photo from 2014, because when we started allowing retail marijuana, this was the day we started allowing applications to be submitted, and we had a few businesses spend the night and longer in front of River City Hall because they were all looking for the same locations in the central business district, and we did have buffer requirements, so I always think it's a fun picture. So current location regulations. So right now we don't allow retail establishments in the mixed use neighborhood zone. And that actually came to be because we had a referendum in 2014 when we started allowing retail marijuana. We had the neighborhood around College and 8th do a referendum because they felt like retail marijuana was a regional use, whereas the medical was more of a local use, and mixed use neighborhood they felt should be serving, it should be commercial serving the neighborhood and not a regional commercial use. And so they asked City Council. City Council at that time did not want to take that zone out, so they did a referendum, and then the rules changed, and mixed use neighborhood does not allow retail. So it does allow medical marijuana stores, but not retail. Also, they're not allowed on the same floor as a residential use in a mixed-use building. They're not allowed in the same premise with a business that has a liquor license. And in the central business district, we don't allow more than one establishment on a block or a street segment. And so those are two different things, and I have a little image to show you. So for instance, if the Star was a new business that wanted to go in, we wouldn't allow another one on the entire block. And also the street segment, which in this case is this blue line, so that means across the street. So all the X's would be all the lots that would not be eligible once you have a retail business at the Star. Now, if it's on the corner, it's a little bit different. Again, it takes out the whole block, but because the corner has two street segments, it would take out everything across the street on this street as well as this one. And so that's how our current regulations are in the central business district for retail and medical marijuana. We also have buffers. We require a 1,000-foot buffer right now between, for schools, as well as licensed daycare facilities that receive state funding and overnight rehab facilities. And then we have a 250-foot buffer from public parks with playground equipment, although the local licensing authority can vary that, I believe, by 10%. And then we also have a 250-foot buffer between establishments, so you can't have, and that's citywide, you can't have another store within 250 feet of each other. So this is just an example of our buffer map we use for internal purposes when someone that is interested in opening a marijuana business comes and talks to staff. And I just kind of blew up the central business district to give you an idea based on our current buffers. You have a little bit of area in this area, and then like the railroad and Jackson property, the Jacksons had been pretty consistent about not wanting to see those uses on their properties. So those are the availabilities now in the central business district for current retail and medical marijuana stores. So Durango today, we have 2 medical marijuana centers, 10 retail stores, and 2 testing lab licenses. It's actually the same company, but they have to have 2 separate licenses, one for medical, one for retail testing. And then I put our sales tax for marijuana. So in 18, our total was 803,000, 3.38%. And in 19, in the staff report I provided, I only had till September, but now I have the end of the year numbers. So in the year, 883,000 and 3.3% for 19. So I just wanted to get into a little bit of detail because again, we've been trying to see how other jurisdictions in Colorado and across the country have been handling the new hospitality establishments. And so I did want to go through a few of these in a little bit more detail. But again, all of this is outlined in the staff report that's provided. So La Plata County just recently decided they were not going to allow hospitality establishments at this time. And so what that could mean for us is if we did allow like the mobile establishments, they probably could not cross over into the county area at this time because the county doesn't allow them. In Cortez, they've not made a decision, but they're going to be discussing with City Council this month, so I think we'll get more information from them as we move forward. Telluride has not made a decision yet. Statewide, Colorado Springs has decided not to opt in at this time. Grand Junction doesn't allow marijuana within the city limits. Steamboat's not considering these at this time. And Glenwood Springs says no one's approached them, so they're waiting to see what other jurisdictions are doing. Boulder's actually established a marijuana advisory licensing board that will be selected by City Council in March. And what they want to look at is how first responders will enter these establishments if smoking is allowed. In what locations should hospitality establishments be allowed? Currently, they can only have 3 marijuana businesses within 500 feet of each other. And so how will the current marijuana, how are the current marijuana security requirements? They require armed security. So how will that be maintained at hospitality establishments? And then Denver, they did have Initiative 300 in 2016, and that's why they've actually had establishments there since 2016. Their establishments, though, were more of, you had to be it was like a members-only club. But once the new House Bill 191230 was passed, those establishments lost those licenses from Initiative 300. And so they're going to take a look at they want to see how the state laws for hospitality establishments go through, they're doing an equity study in Denver. And so we're going to ask for a copy of that when it's completed. But what they're trying to do is see what the equity in the marijuana industry is before they move forward with allowing these types of permits. So right now they haven't allowed them either. Other states we've looked at, Alaska, they started allowing last year on-site consumption at existing retail establishments. So if you have a retail marijuana store, you can now have consumption in those stores. The interesting about Alaska is the state actually approves those licenses, and I don't believe the jurisdictions really have a say in those. In California, the state does allow municipalities to permit hospitality establishments, so similar to Colorado in that sense. And so West Hollywood was one of the first, as the picture I showed you was West Hollywood, and then also San Francisco as well. So and then Washington State, they do allow smoking rooms in hotels. So and those really are the only states that have some type of hospitality or social consumption laws right now. Every other state right now still has the indoor smoking bans and Clean Door Air Acts. So as part of this, if I didn't make that very clear, would be exempt from the Indoor Clean Air Act for the state if we allow smoking lounges. So what the city's been doing, we had a public meeting on December 2nd. We had 17 community members attend, and I did include a summary of that as well as comments that were made at that meeting. And then we've received numerous comments since that time, and those are all part of your packet as well. We've also reached out to the BID, Chamber of Commerce, San Juan Basin Health, and Visit Durango. I know San Juan Basin Health did provide some information that's in your packet. The BID, the Chamber, they'd like to get more formal comments from their boards, but they did tell staff that they'd be interested to see what other jurisdictions do and how it proceeds in the state. One thing they did when retail marijuana was legalized was they did a survey of business owners just to see what they thought about that process, and they said they'd be willing to help us do some community outreach and possibly a survey if we want to gather some more information from the community as a whole. So something we can consider. So a couple things, and really with this, again, the staff report is about, there's a lot of information in here, but there's a few things that staff would really like to get some policy direction on from the city council if we do move forward. So I think the first question really is the city council wanting staff to continue to move forward with this process and start drafting ordinance language for code amendments? The second option is just to take no action and not move forward at this time. And then the third option is to look at some sort of referendum process for the city. But if you are considering and interested in having staff move forward, there's a few things that staff would like to just get some direction on. I know that no decisions can be made tonight, but giving us some direction as we look at ordinance language would be very helpful. And the first one is infused products versus smoking. And so we have heard, and you'll see in your packet, we've heard quite a lot of information about the concerns of secondhand smoke. We haven't heard those same concerns with infused products because that's a little bit different process and consumption. And so staff's been looking at, do we treat smoking establishments differently than we treat infused products, establishments that just want to do infused products? And I know the industry says, well, most of their money is in the smoking products, so I think they have concerns that if we treat them differently, they would only do the types of licenses that allow the smoking. No one would go out and just do an infused products type license. But some of the things that we want to consider with smoking and the concerns with secondhand smoke mainly is the type of building. I mean, we have a few different types of buildings in the city. We have a standalone building, which might be perfectly fine for smoking. You're not impacting anybody else. We have attached buildings that are on their own separate properties, but they share walls with other buildings. So I think like downtown, you might have one building that's on its own property, but it shares walls. And some of those walls are so old that the attics connect. And so things that we want to just be a little bit cautious about if we're allowing smoking uses. And then you have some of them that actually might even share the HVAC systems. And then you have mixed use, multiple use buildings where you have multiple tenants all in the same space, the same ownership of the building, they lease the spaces. And those definitely share HVAC systems. And then the last one are the retail medical marijuana stores. I mean, that's an option I know Alaska's doing where they're allowing them in the stores. So really 4 different types of uses that we can consider as we're looking at smoking versus infused products. I guess the question is, do you guys want to discuss each one? You want me to go through it all and then have a discussion, or how would you like to proceed?
I'm thinking since we have never had this really much of this discussion at all, maybe we just, I'm kind of curious where we might stand as a council before we go into details on opting out or referendum, like you said, those 3 larger options. I would just be interested. Did you raise your hand?
No, I was scratching my
Oh, I
head.
thought you were going like this.
You have 30 seconds.
Could you give an example of an infused product?
Sure. So there's edibles, like a cookie, or there is tinctures, which again, I think more like the salon, the spas might offer things like that. And so we're trying to think as broadly as we can of where these products might be consumed or used. And then I know that SCA's working with Durango Organics on drinkables as well. So those are types of infused where you're not actually smoking or vaping, but you're still consuming. And I know there's more than that, but those are just a few.
And also, just for my own edification, is there any facility where actually if you were using it for medicinal purposes, like maybe even in a doctor's office or something like that, because you might want to have it, for whatever reason, you're testing it out for the first time. Are you aware of anything like that exists?
That exists, it's hard to say, not right now, but I think that that's something that people will be interested in, like counseling offices and different types of medical needs. I do think that we're gonna see the desire to have some of that product, whether it's bring your own or for sale, I don't know how that would work. Probably more like bring your own to those types of facilities, but they would still need to have some sort of license to allow them in those facilities.
And that would be a completely separate process from a retail, social kind of.
It would be under the same license as the establishment that you bring your own product. So we would still have to do some sort of license, but I think there's some broader questions about how do you buffer everything. And so that's why I'm kind of trying to put it into like bite-sized pieces. But yes, those are definitely things that we're thinking through.
And so the folks who are concerned about secondhand smoke wouldn't have the same concerns about the infused products.
Right.
So not only are we dealing with secondhand smoke, but we're dealing with secondhand smoke that has a effect on your...
I don't know the whole medical side of that, so I don't want to make any assumptions, but again, that's definitely something that I think...
Secondhand high, I guess is what
I think that's something that we are trying to consider as part of this process when we're looking at this.
Right. So have we figured out any ways to stop that from occurring?
Well, I was using the analogy, and again, I don't understand the whole medical side of that, and if you really do have that secondhand high to that, so I can't 100% answer that, but just based on, I know if you go into a bar with somebody and you're the DD, you can leave the bar safely and drive them home, and I just don't know if that's the same case in a smoking lounge where you can actually have a DD go on with you and they can actually safely drive you home. So that kind of leaves some questions about how do we want to require parking? Because do we want everybody leaving these facilities driving? And so do we want to look at other options like a taxi space and an Uber space, or just different options for parking that we've never looked at and considered before?
Well, that also brings up for me, and Chief Bramer, you might have some information on this, but we have intoxicated testing for drivers for alcohol. How reliable is it for marijuana use?
Hi, good evening, Chief Bramer, Durango PD. So to answer your question, our officers, we all go through what's called A-RIDE. It's advanced roadside intoxication and drug. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's basically like the DUI testing. So it falls along the lines of SFSTs, the standard field sobriety testing. And so they look for the signs of intoxication that are outside of alcohol. So it's mainly for the use of THC products that it could impair driving when it's out there. It's still kind of in its infancy when it comes down to the actual testing on the state level because of the fact that they have not come up with a quantitative level yet to determine like they do with alcohol.
So you mean a blood?
Like a 0.05 or 0.08 that they do for alcohol.
Okay.
So it's more subjective. So the officers are basing their testimony and based off their observations and how the subject performs during those roadside maneuvers. So they're basically showing what the impairment levels are in order for them to move forth with the arresting decision based off of that. Now we do blood tests, we can do urinalysis tests along with that, and it'll determine a nanogram level of THC that's in the system, but it's not a state recognized portion of it, it's just a confirmation that the courts will use in order to determine that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Oh, nothing for Chief, yeah. Well, I just want to clarify, we state of Colorado passed this legislation January 1st. It's been 45 days old at this point. And what I understood from your testimony was that the only thing that's actually enacted right now is the mobile lounges in Denver that are driving around. There's no other.
I don't know if they are anymore. From what we understand, all of those licenses went away starting January 1st, and they have to come in under the new process, but Denver's not actually licensing them yet because they're going through that equity study.
But, and the other thing I'm looking at is, how it's been demonstrated what a great revenue source marijuana sales has been for the city of Durango, those communities that have embraced it. But I don't see the nexus of how licensing and developing this whole program creates revenue for the city. I mean, at what point do we tax these facilities if they're not selling marijuana? You know, I understand it if it was a combined retail lounge, that like Alaska, that makes the most sense from a tangible cost recovery for the city, I guess. But just to open up, to say, okay, you can party in a hotel room, you know, there's no revenue source there for the city that I understand. So, I don't know, it seems like it's certainly, at this point, an accommodation for the industry, which is still trying to sort it out. And I'm not adverse to the concept, I just don't understand. You know, I think there's a lot of questions for Durango as to how we, you know, which one of these, you know, I think we've spent decades talking about the Clean Air Act, you know, and enforcing that, and, you know, had huge battles with certain establishments in our community about smoking in public places, and have really had a paradigm change in terms of social acceptance of non-smoking in our community. So I wouldn't want that, personally, that's not a direction I'd like to go. Whether there are places that for all the new kinds of things, we are locally manufacturing now this infused seltzer water. You know, that somebody wants to go to a certain bar and have seltzer water with marijuana in it, that doesn't bother me, as long as, and then that's also a recovery point too. If we sell that product in our community, then obviously the city of Durango's on the benefit end of that directly, so.
You can't purchase those though if they're in a bar, because you can't have a liquor license. So a lot of our bars are probably not going to be doing this. This will be probably new establishments, because they're not going to want to get rid of their liquor license, more than likely, to serve marijuana products. But I did want to point out.
And that's a state function, is that?
That is.
That's a state
and
mandate.
We can't be less restrictive than the state. We can be more, but not less. And one thing I do want to point out is, you know, in 2012, when the voters did vote for marijuana, La Plata County, 61.7% did vote for it. And so one of the things that staff's been looking at is even allowing some of these gives people an opportunity to consume what the voters have voted for. So when you have tourists come to town and they're in hotels that don't allow it, or they're in vacation rentals that don't allow it, and we don't allow it in public consumption in public parks or on streets and stuff, these might give them an opportunity to go and consume in an environment that's legal. So that's a big reason staff's been looking into all these options, is because, yeah, I mean, the voters did vote for it in 2012, so.
Good point.
Well, it wouldn't, so you're talking smoking versus infused?
I think that's where I want to get
categories
exactly.
here.
I feel, so there's not really. I think we've kind of determined that there should be, just based on the feedback we've been getting from the public.
Well, one has effects on a person outside of the person using, direct effects, and another one doesn't. So it's like smoking. If you said that people came here to buy cigarettes and we needed to provide them with a place that they could smoke, it's the same kind of concept.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of interesting parallels between different things like alcohol and like, do we allow buses that drive around and people can drink alcohol?
Not in the city limits, no.
So,
we've had people ask that, but we do not allow it.
Yeah, so
I also think there's, you know,
that's not legal either.
Councilor Baxter said there's a difference between the infusion versus smoking, but there's also a difference in the medicinal purposes versus recreational. I guess I would be interested in what the staff's thinking is about medicinal use. Infused seems very simple kind of thinking, but then if you go into actually the smoking for medicinal purposes, that I think it's a little more difficult with the secondhand smoke and secondhand high issues.
We haven't really separated medicinal and recreational out. We've kind of just been looking at them. And like at the beginning, I showed you I think there are going to be some businesses that definitely would be more interested in the medicinal. aspects. So like the health and wellness centers, acupuncture therapists, psychologists, counselors, et cetera. I think there are going to be some businesses that are definitely more interested in the medicinal. What we've been hearing from proponents is they want the recreational, social consumption. And so I think we've just kind of put everything together into like these types of categories: infused products versus smoking, retail versus bring your own, and then looking at the buffers. But that's definitely something, if council wants us to continue looking at ordinance, that we can look at the difference between medicinal and recreational as part of that.
I don't think, I'll chime in on something that Councilman Rutherford just asked. I don't think the statute differentiates between whether you bring medical to the to a social club, if you want to call it that, or whether it's recreational. So I think the assumption would be this is primarily pointed toward recreational uses. But I don't know, the assumption would be that sales at one of these establishments would be recreational sales, not medicinal sales.
Yeah, they don't differentiate in the state statute.
Yeah, the statute doesn't differentiate.
Or the House bill, yeah.
Well, I know that this is challenging because we're not giving you a whole lot of feedback right now in terms of direction. But I think I'll just make a comment and maybe we can talk about. But to me, it's one of those deals that, though I think this is possibly coming and we might even possibly be interested in it, as I look at all of the things that the staff has on their plate right now relative to, their workload, I don't see this today rising to the level of prioritization that I would want to express that now is the time for the staff to spend a lot more time on developing something for the city of Durango today. It's interesting to know when one of the things that's behind that comment for me is looking at the agenda packet, looking at all the commentary, looking at how many people showed up at your public settings, and I relate that back to just when we were talking about redrawing the lines relative to where you could sell and how many people were involved in that process from the industry and how many people were involved in that process for the community. And for whatever reason, maybe it hasn't hit the radar yet or it just hasn't galvanized enough steam, but we're not seeing that level of interest rise up in the community. Not that it's not out there, not that we might not eventually become interested in it, but I don't see the evidence of it in the community today to demonstrate a need in the community that we should take all of these other things off the plate. I mean, we just got done approving something that's going to take you guys multitudes of hours where we know there are hundreds and hundreds of people in the community that are interested in pursuing that homeless plan after years of study and evaluation. So, my thought is, it's not worth right now, today, going forward. If the community hears that statement and they hear it from the council and they want to react to it and say, no, you're wrong, we really have to be at the forefront of this, the industry's really behind it and all that thing, well, I'm sure we'll hear from them. And then perhaps that will guide us a little bit more, but I don't sense the groundswell here to guide us to take this to the next level and to spend that kind of time on it. That's my theme today.
I'm reminded about, we were one of the first communities in the state of Colorado to really implement vacation rental regulations and embed them into our land use code in a pretty robust way. And to the extent that many other communities around the state are piggybacking on our hours of labor, basically. And this time around, I'd like to watch Boulder. I'd like to watch Telluride. I'd like to see some of these other communities work through some of those labor pains and vet it out. Not that our community is the same as any of those, and we certainly have unique sociology and needs in our own community, but I'd like to see this industry, what the industry's response is, as well as community's response, and kind of monitor over the next 6 to 12 months and perhaps revisit this thing again, see how fast it progresses, one, and two, if there's anything of merit that is significantly important to the community. One that we look at is, Chris was saying, we got the same group of people is going to be implementing the homeless plan, implementing the urban renewal plan, put teeth in our character districts, work on the streets and alleys. And so these are all things that, you know, divert our attention from in this next 12-month period. And I feel a little bit like this doesn't rise to the top of critical importance, although it's certainly in a budding era for this type of consideration. So.
Great. Other thoughts, Council? Okay, I think I would agree with Councilor Patine and Councilor Burkett. Said that, I think they said it well. Just it might feel a little, we have a lot on our plate, I guess is what it feels. And so I do appreciate the time that you've spent, staff, and working with the community on this topic. And so next steps from here, I mean, I appreciate what we're learning. I would like to continue to track other communities. And, you know.
I might say, you know, we should applaud the work and the information that was given to the staff and working with that private study group that, you know, brought us this information from the industry to create this issue. And we aren't, you know, I'm not trying to in any way diminish that work. You know, I think that will be, and that's how this thing will carry forward is continued pressure and continued information flow from those folks that have helped us out get this far. So I'd like to see that continue.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think next steps then, the City Council ultimately directed us to look at the process, so we will wait and hear from City Council if you direct us again to relook at that process in the future.
I think if you see an update relative to what Councilor Brookie said, where there's a community that we can look at that, you know, can show us some evidence of going through that process with the industry, maybe it's a more robust process that we can evaluate, that would rise to the level of let's take another look. And it's certainly not a rejection of the idea in this session tonight. It's not a vote against it. It's just saying, hey, this doesn't feel like something that should rise to the top of our agenda today. But I think we would like to follow it.
Is our public hearing closed, or is that?
There's no.
This was just a staff
Okay.
discussion.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nicole. Appreciate the time and effort. Okay, moving on to Amber Blake, Interim City Manager's report.
So I will make this quick. We've had a very long meeting.
Thank you.
Our November and December sales tax reports are loaded online. I believe I updated at the last meeting on November, and so I'll provide the numbers for December. For sales tax, we are up year to date, so end of year 3.1%. Marijuana, as you saw in Nicole's presentation, was 3.36% of the total. And then lodgers tax ended up 6.8% year to date. So we had a good year in both sales and lodgers tax for 2019.
6.8 on lodgers.
On lodgers, and 3.1 on sales tax.
So for 2019 compared to 2018?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So it was up, what was the percentage again for the year to date?
Year to date for December, so 2018 to 2019 was 3.1%.
Okay.
For sales tax and 6.8% for lodgers tax.
Thank you.
You are welcome. And then I have a couple of packets for you with our updated design of, and this does not include the entire slide deck, but I wanted to give you an overview of what we've got for our fourth quarter ongoing CIPs. We'll definitely get comments and feedback from council on the design and format. I have two items. So the first one, yes.
And will you be posting these on the website immediately? I'm sure you might have been working on them still today or something.
Yep,
but
we will. As soon as the PIO can get to it tomorrow, we'll get those posted. If they haven't done it tonight, I'm not sure. I got posted this afternoon. So City of Durango fourth quarter, this is not fully comprehensive. We're still working on every single project to get them in the file. But we have ongoing projects. These are projects that roll year to year. You will see in the format, so if we go to the first one, street overlays, we've got the department, the funding source, project description, then we have the project number and the first year of appropriation. If it's an ongoing project like street overlays, it's been appropriated for decades. Project closeout at the end of the year, and then we'll show a carry forward budget at the beginning of the next year. So when you see the first quarter report, you'll be able to compare it to the end of year, and you'll see how that rolls.
So the total budget includes the carry forward?
The carry forward, the total budget includes the carry forward, and then what you have for total expenditures for the year. If we move to, let's see, on all of our roll forward. Okay, so fourth quarter financial management software. So you can see this exclamation point icon, pending resource availability. We are short-staffed in finance. We do not have the staffing levels that we need to appropriately implement the financial management software. Full implementation of Harris Financial, CIS, and Enterprise HR payroll.
So is the Harris Financials the budgeting and financial statement software?
No, this was a project from last year. The new budget software is not a Harris Financials. That project was a priority of moving that forward, so we're implementing that. That's a 2020 project.
So we appropriated it in 2011. Yeah?
And this is an ongoing, so yes.
So is it ongoing because we're constantly needing to refine it, or is it ongoing because we appropriated it, we still haven't completed it?
No, it's continuous updates on each of the programs that we have. So Enterprise Financials gets the update, we build additional reporting.
Okay, thank you.
So that's how that one's ongoing. And then we have another icon in here that shows construction. This is Lake Night Horse. The ABA fishing pier near the boat ramp was completed, and the test water well revealed that it wasn't sufficient to sustain adequate well production.
So on the project water line replacements, you have a carry forward of 202,000 and a total budget of 200, and then you have total expenditures of 225,000?
I have to ask Devin why that's like that.
So I think this is all a good question. What's our goal here tonight?
So the goal is to look at it. I will email you this in electronic format.
Okay.
And then feedback.
I will respond to any questions. We can refine it. We have the two different reports. I think it's important to note because we do have the projects that are ongoing year to year, like the Enterprise Financial. We'll use that as a good example. Then you have your blue packet. That is your one-time projects, multi-year projects. Could be done in 1 year, could be done in 3 years.
And this is all of them?
This is not all of them.
Oh.
This is a snapshot of the projects. So I'll leave this with council for feedback, but as you can see, we chose the different color icons, so you know this one's in progress.
So this is just an example of what it will look like, and you're seeking our feedback on the report type and what we want to see.
And would you then, I think we need a deadline, so would you then expect to present this at the March 2nd?
March 2nd.
As part of your report?
Yes.
So at the
And March at the city council meeting, you present the final report?
Yes, and what would be very helpful is if this slide deck will be huge.
Yeah.
It seems like this would be really good, going through the whole thing would be really good in a study session, no?
And that's fine, but what would be more helpful is if you have specific projects that you're interested in, if you can give me those projects, then I can report on either that type of project or specific projects, so we don't take 30 minutes to go through a CIP report. We can load, once we get it finalized, the full slide deck every quarter. The public knows what to expect, when to expect it, how to read it.
And I would point out that this is not the discussion of the policies around the CIP, which would, in my mind, be important for an upcoming study session. This is just to give, as part of your monthly financial report, here are quarterly financial report. Here's the status, and here's some things we might think of as red flags, or you might have identified that need some direction. So I want to point out.
So you're just talking format of report, really?
I think that's what she's asking for, is format, and so that we can then be consistent with providing this to the public at the March meeting.
That's the key words there. We all can be consistent about telling the public exactly where a particular project sits at this point in time.
That's right.
We do have a study session that includes council financial policies scheduled for later this spring. So that is forthcoming.
Great.
And is that where the CIP discussion would be on?
The policy.
The policy.
That's what I'm thinking, yeah, okay. And if we need further discussion on this at that time, and as we learn more about this and stuff, it might help us with ideas.
What date would you like our initial feedback by?
If you can provide me your initial official feedback by next Tuesday,
What's the date?
the 25th.
Great.
If you can provide that by next Tuesday, then we'll be able to work on it for this March 2nd.
Okay.
Thank you very much. My last item is food tax rebate and utility rebates. We are updating the forms. There will be a news release that goes out this Friday. The rates are going to be, the rebate rates are increasing by 3% over the 2019 year for the utility refund amount, and they're increasing 3% over the 2017 amount for the food tax rebate. For some reason, I don't have the information why, but there was a reduction in the 2018 for 2019 budget.
A significant reduction.
40% reduction.
Yeah.
So we're amending that, and we'll have the forms out online. We'll have them at the Transit Center, City Hall, the Rec Center, the library, the Senior Center. We'll make sure that Martha Johnson over at Health and Human Services has those, and we'll make sure that we get the information.
And you'll send that to us.
We will be sending this information to council that shows the previous years, so that if you're asked, you have.
Then I can go talk to those 35 people who have talked to me about it.
Well, my recollection too is dollar amounts that were funded previously were not in past years always fully utilized. I mean, there was a low utilization rate for what was allocated.
There was a low utilization rate, and at first glance, I thought it was just the actual, but how much was budgeted.
Right.
But when we dug further into it, the actual amount for the rebate was reduced. So the amount that the individual could receive as a rebate, even though we had budgeted more than what was requested by the rebatees.
I get that point too, but as long as we're delving into this particular issue, I'd like to know how much goes unused, because I believe that's been the issue that previous councils were struggling with. Is how can we communicate better to make this program known to the public?
Absolutely. How do we communicate better? Absolutely.
And so, if it's money sitting there waiting to be used.
Yep.
All right, so I will send that over, and I think that is what I have for this evening.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to council reports and actions. Item 13.1, continued discussion of possible action concerning council appointee evaluations and salary increases. So how do we want to start with this topic?
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
And this is for Amber, because you supervise HR. Do we have a minimum amount of time that someone has to work in their position to qualify for any kind of COLA raise? So,
Do not.
so somebody could start December 15th and qualify for a COLA raise 2 weeks later?
For the cost of living, yes.
Yeah.
For the merit increases, no.
Yeah, so I would like to suggest that is...
May I just
go
ask
ahead.
one clarifying question? So would that be on their full salary or just on what they earned from December 15th to December 30th?
The way that I understand that we've implemented it in the past, it's on the full salary.
I would like to suggest that we direct these questions toward
But
the city.
Crystal Tweet is here. Our
Oh, she is
Yeah.
here. Perfect.
Yeah.
I didn't see her
Stay for
there.
this conversation.
Oh, thank you. I didn't see
To
her.
help avoid any sort of conflict.
Yeah, I would hope that, yeah.
Perfect. Oh, that's.
I didn't see you
I'm
there,
sorry, I
Crystal.
didn't get
Thank
what
you.
were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Thank
think
you.
to direct these questions to Amber is the.
Yeah, I didn't see her, so.
That's perfect. Thanks for being here and waiting for a long meeting.
So was it based upon their full salary or the actual amount that they were paid during?
So the increase is provided at the first pay period of the year, and so what happens is it's added on to every pay period for the rest of that year. So
Nah,
for
that's not the
2020.
question. So is it based upon their salary that they were hired at, or is it based upon the amount of money that they had earned in the previous year?
It's based upon, so the current salary that they were making prior to us implementing the COLA. So whatever their salary base rate was, that's what it's based upon.
So if they started on December 15th at a set rate, they would then qualify for whatever that COLA was, starting January 1. And even though another person might have worked a full year,
correct,
they would have the same benefit.
That's correct. In terms of the cost of living adjustment, that
So
is
I would, I would just suggest that you might want to consider looking at that, because it's an unusual, from my experience, it's pretty unusual to not have a minimum amount of time you've had to have worked to qualify for a COLA. The least I've ever seen it is 9 months. I've never seen that where you could work 2 weeks and get a 3% increase in salary. The same as the person who worked a year. And so I think that I would encourage us, not directing you, but as we look at our policies and best practices, I think we might want to look at that.
Well, yeah, I guess my question then for you is, we got 3 people that are, we're talking about, and each of them worked into one entire calendar year.
Yeah, it wasn't the question. We were just clarifying how the COLA worked in general.
Okay.
I mean, at least I was. I don't know what Barbara.
Yeah, that was my question, is I wanted to understand how we currently implement it, because I do think, as we think about this, in any case of going forward, you could have anyone working 6 months, 3 months, and what would be the equity for other employees who might have worked a full year?
Can you address that philosophically?
And
From the HR perspective,
compensation
cost of
is,
living
yes,
adjustments?
compensation is struggling, and typically in years past, we've done it based upon merit, and that's what's defined in our personnel regulations. This year, as you know, with the implementation of the new pay plan, things were done a little differently because we had some that warranted an increase as a result of the compensation study. With that said, not everybody did, so instead of looking at the merit, it was determined that we would look at the cost of living adjustments, and we used benchmarking based on employers' council to determine what we would use or propose to all of you for the year moving forward. So having said that, it's a little more untraditional than what we have done in years past. We have done cost of living in the past. The city, a while, let's say maybe about 8 years back, was doing a combination of both merit and cost of living.
That's right.
So there are different ways of doing things, and so that was just simply what was proposed for this year, given the implementation of the new plan. It is hard, and even with implementation of the plan, because not everything was implemented in full recommendation, it also creates its own compression issues, similar to what you're talking about with those with years of service and longer tenure are now closer to those that have just started with the city more recently. It's a challenging discussion.
Oh, I recognize it, and I don't want to belabor it. I just think that as we're thinking about things and best practices there, I think you might want to look at when does a cost of living, what's the minimum amount of time an employee needs to have worked in that position to qualify for a cost of living. Because I don't think it's necessarily fair to the person who's been in the position 365 days and the person who's been there 15.
Can we move on from
So
this
that's it.
discussion and
That's
get to
it.
the, yeah. I think that's a good point, but it's definitely not what we're here to talk about at 10 o'clock at night.
Right.
So what do we have to decide on this thing?
I think we are near the conclusion of new evaluation process that I would gotta give kudos to this council for implementing and creating and devising together. I think it's been really good work. And I think we have a really thorough, robust process as a result of a lot of hours together working on a new process with new criteria. And I think we're just at the end of that process now where we need to just finalize it. I wanted to let you all know that I did deliver the signed evaluations to Crystal, and they are in our new evaluation boxes. So, this is really, I'm looking at this as the last step in our process together. And we need to decide if we want to do salary increases. I think the conversation is retroactive to 1/1 for our 3 appointees based on the evaluation. And it would be for the cost of living adjustment, if so moved.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I do have a question on this, and it does pertain, because we're in an unusual situation with an interim city manager, and thank you very much, Amber, appreciate that. Is the cost of living based on this temporary salary, or would it be based on the salary that had been, we'd been working under before we provided the increase in salary for the temporary role? So is it based on what the salary would have been if it hadn't been upped? Because you understand, because we don't know the future. I'm just trying to determine what the basis point is.
Or is it?
She actually brings a good point up, because if you end up back in the other role, yeah, right.
Or do we say 3% for, and I might get the numbers wrong, but 3% for the 10 months or 9 month salary, and then 3% on the 3 month salary? So that there's a 3% cost of living adjustment for the 2 positions that the person held? I don't know. There's
different ways of looking at it.
Yeah, lots of different ways of looking at it.
It's not as straightforward as the other 2 appointees.
No, the other 2 appointees are very straightforward.
It's an unusual circumstance.
In that light, should we attack them separately?
Yes, let's do.
Yeah.
3 different motions.
So, let's start with the person that's not here, which is the judge.
Okay.
And I would make a motion to give the judge the same COLA percentage, which I believe is 3.1, 3.01 or 3.1% cost of living increase.
Whatever was given to the employees.
Yeah,
If you want to
maybe we can clarify that exact number, but I thought it was 3.1.
We
As determined by-
implemented 3.0.
3.0, okay.
3.1 is what the Western Slope was predicted for projected increases for 2020. But with that, we just proposed a flat 3%.
That was my confusion. So the actual number is 3.0
I will second that.
for the judge.
Any further discussion from the municipal judge? Mr. Fleury, can we have roll call, please?
Councilor Baxter.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brookie.
Yes.
Councilor Bettine.
Yes.
Councilor Noseworthy.
Yes.
And Mayor Youssef.
Yes. Second motion?
Moving forward, I would like to make another motion to provide that same 3% cost of living increase to our city attorney.
May I just suggest that, and I hope it was clear in the last motion, that this is retroactive to January 1, 2020.
Good point.
Thank you.
And Dean, you want to add that to yours?
Yeah, I'd like to make that retroactive to January 1st, 2020.
2020.
2020.
Yeah, I'll second.
Thanks.
Further discussion? May we have a roll call, please?
Councilor Baxter.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brookie.
Yes.
Councilor Bettine.
Yes.
Councilor Noseworthy.
Yes.
And Mayor Youssef.
Yes.
Well, I'm kind of on a roll, and I might not get my tongue tied this time. So I would like to propose the interim city manager be given a 3% cost of living increase on her current salary, retroactive to 2020, January 1st, 2020.
I will second.
Further discussion from council?
I believe that we provided a significant increase, recognizing the significant responsibilities. And I'd like to say that going forward, I think that we should consider that the salary is based on, I'd like to consider an option to present the cost of living based on the salary of the original salary of $137,904, which was documented in the 2019. And the reason I say that is that, you know, if circumstances should change, I don't know how things will go, there's always an opportunity later for an increase in merit, recognizing that, because that was not included, merit into the interim city's work. And I think that we have to be consistent on how we're applying that. So I just would feel more comfortable with it either based on the salary that was presented, the $137,904, or 9 months of that salary and 3 months of the current, which would reflect the changing state status.
My goal in making the motion as I did was to achieve that consistency with the other 356 employees that we have. Noting the concerns that you had with that situation as well, that there might be some future analysis of 15 days versus 365 days, but I think you know, my goal is consistency throughout, and we've offered this to folks. Granted, not our specific appointees, the 3 folks that we are talking about tonight, but throughout the system. Yeah, if we hired a person in November, they got a COLA increase for the year, or for the future. Everything's future. It's not going backwards. So that's my goal in looking at the future, not looking at the job they performed 8 months ago or 4 months ago. They're doing their job right now, and that's the job that they should be looking at an increase for, in my opinion.
My only concern that you bring up is that we do not know what the future holds, and I really appreciate all the extra work that our interim city manager has stepped up to do, and I most definitely feel that I think that it's the fair thing to do to apply a COLA increase across the board fairly to all. If we make that decision to implement a cost of living adjustment, that we do that for all of our employees. I just think that one interesting point I think you're bringing up, Councillor Noseworthy, is that we don't know what the future holds. And if we do attach this COLA increase to her interim salary, if in fact it were to be a situation where Amber decided, for example, not to apply for the city manager position and return to her old position, it would be at the old rate. And so I'm wondering how we can address that, because I would like to see a salary adjustment put through for our interim city manager in much the same way that every other employee has received. And I just don't know how to accomplish that, depending on what our future holds.
So typically what we do then is we would remove them back to their former pay increase, and then the 3% increase would be applied on that at that time.
Okay, so.
That's my assumption.
Okay.
So it's based on the 2019 salary.
So
Plus.
I think now I'm understanding Councilor Baxter's original question.
Yes.
So the increase is applied on the current position. Should the position change in the future, it would then revert to the previous pay that the position was earning, and then the 3% would be applied on that. So it wouldn't be applied.
So it wouldn't be a permanent based on the higher salary?
Right.
Right.
Correct.
It just is applied to that position. So again, once we go
For the
back to-
period of being in that position?
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
The
Thank
salient
you for
point is,
clarifying that.
My apologies. I think that's exactly what we're trying to get to.
That's what we're trying to get to.
the salient feature is 3%, no matter what that is based on.
Thank
so
you.
if she reverts back to her original position, I assume,
Great.
just as you said, it goes back to.
Yes.
That's all the clarification I needed. Any other questions from council? I think we have a motion and a second on the table.
I'd just like to say one more thing. I mean, I think all the vehicles that we have for providing pay increases should be evaluated in our future discussions about should we, are we more comfortable with merit increases, and in our whole evaluation process, are we set up to make those merit decisions. This
Or is
year.
it a combination of merit and COLA like
That's
it
right,
was?
which is what I've been working with for a number of years, is a, you know, and now we have the vehicle via the evaluation forms and that kind of thing to make a more informed decision about merit increases in the future. So I just want to throw that out there as well.
Excellent. Okay, may we have a roll call, please?
Councilor Bettine.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brookie.
Yes.
Councilor Baxter.
Yes.
Councilor Noseworthy.
Yes.
And Mayor Youssef.
Yes. Congratulations, council, on completing that process.
Well, and congratulations
to our appointees.
for being such good appointees.
And thank you for reminding me about that, Councilor Baxter. Thank you to our appointees for piloting this process with us and working with us on this entire thing.
It wasn't always easy.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. I meant to say that earlier, so thank you. Okay, because everyone was very cooperative and we really appreciated that. Council reports and actions. Anybody have any updates?
I can give you a brief one. The Chamber Board met this morning. We had a presentation from Scott Shine and Alex out of Business Development from the city on the URA. The Chamber did vote to write a letter of support for the URA. We were impressed by the presentation, so I wanted to thank Scott and Alex for their excellence in that. And then also just wanted to bring it to the public's attention that we're watching tonight relative to the presentation that the Parks and Recreation staff gave on the Animas River Trail and the 32nd Street Bridge proposal. Because it was abridged, the presentation was abridged because of the time limits. There was a full presentation that you can see on the agenda on the February 12th, 2020 Parks and Recreation Board meeting. You can't really see it, you have to listen to the recording, but it should be pretty clear on there. You may want to check that out.
Excellent.
So I attended the Plata County Economic Alliance, the investors meeting, which is always held the second Tuesday of the month, starting at 7:30 at the library. And this past session, we had Ellen Roberts and others talking about the Environmental Impact Fund. But next month on March, I think it'll be the 3rd, maybe that Tuesday, we'll have folks from UniRevs be talking about their business, their escape-funded business. They're going gangbusters, and so I encourage folks to hear that. I always attend, so if others wanted to attend, I encourage you to participate.
March 10th is the date.
Oh, yes, excuse me, March 10th. I was confusing it with the
And
first
it's always
one.
the library now?
It's at the library now,
Okay.
yes.
And what time?
Starts at 7:45, or 7:30, people are socializing, and 7:45 to 9 a.m. is the meeting. So we would need to, if other counselors were going, more than one, we need to post. I also wanted to just make a quick plug to the community, because what I also love about this town is the way different groups come together. And February 25th and 26th, the Actors Gang from LA will be coming to town and presenting the new Colossus, which is the poem on the Statue of Liberty. And it'll be 12 different people depicting the immigrant story from 1830 to present day. And this is also funded by a local nonprofit. The community college is involved, or not the community college, the community concert hall is involved. And I just encourage the public to be aware of it. And I think it's a great way for us to learn more about different people's history and experience and celebrate diversity.
Thank you.
Well, happy Valentine's Day for everybody that survived. I was happened to be Valentining up in Denver this weekend, and this is driving down the street listening to Colorado Public Radio, and they were talking about, a pretty serious discussion about police shootings in Denver and police shootings in Aurora particularly. And all of a sudden I heard Durango in the conversation on CPR, and they were talking about how they need to evaluate what's going right in Durango based on our low volume of police-involved shootings, and they talked about the policies that were enacted by our police department. Totally unprepared for that, for hearing that good news driving on Colorado Public Radio. So kudos to the chief in the back of the room here for whatever policies you've instituted that are gaining the attention of the state of Colorado. as one of the better examples of training for officers so to avoid police-involved shootings. That was really surprising. Other than that, I'm going to the airport commission tomorrow, and that continues to remain a really exciting time at the airport commission, not only implementing their recent new additions, but talking about the revised master plan out there for good things happening at the airport.
Excellent. So in the past 2 weeks since the last meeting, I've attended High Noon Rotary and spoke with them. I was invited to do so, and also the Restaurant Association. And I want to say that I am always so astounded at how involved our community is in our community. The people at High Noon Rotary are, they have 2 kids that they sponsor to come to the States, and all the things that they do around taking care of those kids and letting them learn about what the United States is about, and just really encouraging them to do well, and all the other things that they do. And the Restaurant Association is just, they are involved in so many different aspects of our high school kids, and our middle school and our younger kids, in preparing them to have jobs when they graduate and to be ready for employment. And I'm constantly amazed by that. And then I also want to thank the 20 people who showed up at my office hours yesterday. And I'll have office hours again in March. And we had a rousing conversation. We had, there were at least 18 different topics, I would swear, that people talked about. And not everyone agreed on everything, which was wonderful. So we got to hear everybody's point of view, and everyone remained absolutely civil, which was just astonishing. So it was a great conversation.
It's interesting, the office hours, I would encourage you had mentioned a town hall at one point during new business, and the office hours are a really great way to, get to, the community really likes to have access. I had a full boardroom table as well here in the city council during my office hours, and robust, great conversation, and very little actually about the bridge. And I did want to talk about that, but it's a really good way to connect with the community because they appreciate, I think, people's availability. It's a little bit difficult to manage the conversations because there's a lot of different conversations that want to happen all at once, and you want to be respectful of people's time. So there's that issue as well when you get that many people in attendance. But it's really a nice way to connect with the people. I had several representatives from the Neighbors in Need Alliance, and I did forward you guys their study session minutes, their minutes from their campsites, and they did confirm that they were looking at campsites. They asked me some difficult questions about that. They're working with staff, closely with staff regarding potential campsite locations as they narrow it down. But it was nice to kind of hear where they were. And then they did, and I wanted to make sure you guys had this date of March 9th at 6 p.m., which is the meeting that they're having at the fairgrounds, and they're bringing up the executive director from Camp Hope. So it would be just potentially very interesting for us to hear from them. And we may want to see how many counselors might want to be interested in attending that and actually post that as a meeting. And we did have some discussion on the 32nd Street Bridge and put some budgeting questions as well, but it was a really good discussion. I also was at the Strategy and Long-Term Finance Committee meeting. Councilor Baxter was there for a while as well. Really good discussion, excellent presentation from our staff and finance department. They started to lay the groundwork for kind of how our financial system works together. And I wasn't sure if Amber wanted to give a brief update. I will tell you though that they were wanting more direction, more specific direction, and I kept kind of saying, let's give this a little bit of time. I think that once they get, that really council wants to have your expertise and new eyes looking long-term really on our general fund, and we'd love to kind of see what you guys learn over these next couple of months and understanding some of our priorities and see kind of where it takes you without us completely directing every little thing. So I encourage them to just really take 3 months to kind of on board a little bit and see where they went with some of that. I think that's kind of where we left it. Amber, would you agree?
So we're in an onboarding process and we did an overview of municipal finance, which the presentation that was provided by the finance director, Finance Director Wayne McKethan, was fantastic, and it will be added to our council onboarding process as well, because it does a really good job of describing the differences between municipal finance and standard banking, business world finance. So we started with that, and then we started digging into capital needs at a very high level. Next session, we'll be talking about the amount of money that's available in the dedicated revenues. We'll be looking specifically at the general fund. We will have provided council the corrected, amended appropriations ordinance, budget resolution, as well as the budget document will be live and posted by that next meeting. So they'll really be digging into the general fund as was requested by the council for that board. So looking at where that structural deficit lies, and then continuing from there. But the board did ask to take some smaller bites and really be able to understand the fund, where we're at, and that way they felt more comfortable with providing advice to the council.
Could you please clarify, you expect us to see the adopted budget, revised adopted budget by the 18th?
March 2nd.
Or March 2nd?
By the time the advisory board has their meeting, they will be able to have that information to review. And
so will that go to council as well at the beginning? Because I think
it'll go March 2nd, we'll come to council, and then we'll take the information that's whatever council adopts that evening will go to the board.
So before the March 2nd meeting, we'll receive the corrected budget, the corrected budget, and then we will have a adoption of it on
March 2nd.
Okay, question on that. Okay,
excellent.
That's excellent. Thank you.
And I guess I had one more comment just in reference to Councilor Noseworthy's Muni Revs presentation. Muni Revs did win the RFP. They were awarded the contract for the city. They are our new vacation rental tax collection group.
Great.
So we are contracted with them.
How long is that contract for? Is that?
1 year?
It's an annual.
I think they're a success story that we should all know more about and be able to celebrate.
I thought it would be good information for you to have, so when you meet with them, you know.
Are we also discussing working with their division that works on sales tax?
And we are looking at the division on sales tax. I've already had 2 meetings with finance, and
excellent.
We're moving forward. So
excellent.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Moving on, future potential agenda items. This was an agenda item that we had informally discussed at our study session. And we can have this conversation later, or we can have it tonight. But I was going to follow up on that. It was an informal discussion to potentially consider removing it from here and having it in the new business, and also discussing, we can still continue to bring things up in council reports and actions as needed. So if anyone has any further thoughts on that right now, or maybe it's late, I wasn't sure.
I would like to suggest it's kind of late.
I think
I think we have plenty of agenda items for the next meeting, so.
We can maybe follow this up with our next study session.
Yeah.
Okay, is everyone comfortable with that?
I would like to announce, just so the public that they're waiting, we've met today to work on the advisory boards, and we'll be having some, can you clarify that to folks? On the decisions of when some of the advisory board decisions might be coming, and some we're still be waiting on.
Yes, good, thank you, Councilor Noseworthy. And go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just suggest that we started at 4:30 today, my colleagues and I, to work on reaching a decision on the advisory boards, and I do believe we've reached some, and there'll be some that we'll still have openings for, so that announcements will be coming out shortly.
That's right.
And I want to thank everyone, and I think I speak on behalf of all the councilors, for all the people who applied. We had some great, highly qualified people, and if you weren't selected, we really encourage you to apply again. There will always be openings.
Thank you for that update. And with that, I think we can adjourn the meeting. Our next meeting is March 2nd. And thank you to our PIO professionals in the back for bringing us live on NECA, and we apologize for the multiple delays tonight. Thank you.